Thank you for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share. It helps out the show a ton. And you can follow us on Instagram.
Enjoy.
It's funny. I know you've been doing shows for a long time, but my other show we started doing in the summer, July or something. I
Hmm.
still am like a flop sweat every time. Like I had a
Oh, really?
lot of anxiety about speaking in public. Welcome to the Red Gauge podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that how we're starting?
Yeah. Why
Start
not?
right
You'll
there.
throw it in there.
Do it.
I'm Kyle. That's Josh. We have our esteemed guest today, Max Aita. Pretty excited about the day.
Yeah. Thanks
Yeah.
for thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thanks for being
Yeah.
here.
Thanks for saying yes.
Yeah. We really appreciate it a lot. Um, well, we were just talking about, getting started in training. So I know that you're like a weightlifting specialist, right? And you've done quite a bit in the powerlifting community over the last
Hmm.
10 years or so.
Yeah.
Um, so you guys started in high school. Were you a weightlifting specialist in high school? Did you fall in love with the clean and the snatch and everything?
Yeah. So my story starts in 1996. I was 12 years old. I saw the 96 Olympic Games on TV, and they had like a tiny clip of Naeem Suleimanoglu, who was like the greatest of all time
Hmm.
weightlifter, won his third consecutive gold medal. I saw that. It was like 2 seconds long. And I fell in love with it. And I was like, that's what I'm going to be. I'm going to be a weightlifter. I'm going to the Olympics. I'm going to win a medal for the United States. And I just started like lifting. I just like went into my dad's garage. He had these like sand plastic weights, and I would just do what looked like a snatch and a clean and jerk in my mind, and kind of like mess around. I was doing that for a little bit. And, I just started like reading what I could. I would buy books. There's a bunch of like books back then that were like the encyclopedia of weightlifting, and you like read it, and it's just like a bunch of random bits and pieces of information, but like
Hmm.
the Bulgarian training system was what stood out to me because that's who he was a Bulgarian
Right.
national. And
You'd already
then
seen success. It was there.
yeah, I was like, well, I'm just going to do what they do, right? Of course, it makes sense. And, I just started squatting and training and lived maxing out every single day. Met my first coach when I was probably like 17, 16.
Yeah.
Uh, and I was driving out to go to his garage, he coached kids at a high school. He retired from the Bay Area up to Montana where I was. And I would just go there at like 7:30. I'd leave and I get there by 8:30. I'd start training at 8:30 and come home at 8 o'clock. And we just trained the entire time, every day, like during the summer. And then when I got out of high school, just every single day, just go and max out for 8 hours a day. And I literally mean we would max out for 8 hours a day. It would just be like snatch maximum,
Yeah,
front
yeah.
squat maximum. Yeah, it's
At the end of the
crazy.
day, you're doing a strict curl
Yeah.
and one arm deadlift behind the back and whatever you can find to do.
Yeah. You just start missing. You just miss every lift
Uh-huh.
at some
I'm
point.
gonna
But
have
yeah,
if any kids watch this, they're gonna be like, Coach, this guy, look, we should be maxing out every day.
Yeah.
Come
They're
on.
gonna be like,
That's what
let's
Max
do it.
did.
Um,
yeah.
yeah, we both had the same coach. Our first coach was the same coach, and he
Oh, nice.
started training in, I want to say like the late 40s or mid 50s.
Nice.
And so in our weight room, he had a set of filing cabinets, and he'd just get a new filing cabinet every time one was full. And so it was
Mhm.
every journal, every research
Wow.
paper, every magazine workout, every book. Like I remember cracking open like a volume of super training when I first started lifting and just being like, like what even is this? Like it just is,
That's crazy.
like
Every idea
yeah,
you can
700
think of.
pages of power work that don't make any sense. I was like, this isn't some
We
a book
had
that a person reads.
I had we there was another guy that joined later as like a coach, and he was a really accomplished weightlifter. And he came in, and both these guys, their coaches were in their 60s, 70s when we met him. But he had like all these old strength and health magazines, and he would bring them in and just give them to us, and he'd read those.
Hmm.
And it was like kind of crazy to look at like what was going on in those, and like
Right.
just how it's kind of funny because like how the industry has like not changed one bit. Basically, it's just
Yeah.
like strength and health magazines, guys selling liver pills and
Uh-huh. Yeah,
whatever
yeah, yeah,
other
yeah,
whatever
yeah.
other garbage there is that is the same thing that happens today.
Yeah, a
So it's just
thousand
funny.
versions of the Thigh Master for every part of your body. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, right.
Yeah.
Try a
Yeah,
Viagra.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
totally.
it was a really interesting like time capsule to go through because like you, I spent a huge amount of time in the weight room when I got into it, like an unhealthy amount of time in the weight room. And and it was really, really interesting to see like you would read something that somebody famously did in like the 50s or like the Nebraska football program of like I think
Yeah,
late 70s or early 80s, right? And it's like, here's this program that Nebraska did, and they stomped everybody. And it was like, okay, well, they were the first ones to adopt weightlifting. I mean, maybe
right.
not literally the first
Totally.
ones, but
Yeah,
early adopters,
Yeah,
right?
program wide.
Yeah, they had a
yeah,
super talented group of kids who had
yeah,
never lifted weights. And so if you had them do almost anything, it would have been
yeah.
not that the program's bad. I'm not like, I don't want to,
Totally.
throw
Yeah,
salt on
Yeah,
any
somebody else's
program
slug.
would have
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yielded those results.
Yeah, anything's good.
yeah. It's a funny thing because you see that like even today, it's like this is like a major like defining sort of theme in a lot of what we're doing now. But it's like no one invented lifting,
Hmm.
right? Like no one invented the doing a certain number of reps a certain number of times. Like
Uh-huh.
everything that you think you've created, invented has been done before,
Yeah,
100% guaranteed, right? If it wasn't in like some Chinese gym being done, we joke that like China bought like starting strength and gave it to like 5,000 weightlifters to see if it works. And like
right.
no one got better. Okay, whatever, who cares? Like next book.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so
yeah.
Yeah,
like
we talk
every,
about that all the time.
yeah, like every single thing's been done. The thing that makes people great is outside of like genetics and talent and things is just execution.
Hmm.
This is a game of execution. It's all a game of like, we're all going to do some combo of sets and reps and coach somebody some way or the other. It's all about the details of executing. Can you adapt the program a little bit better to each person? Can you get them to perform every exercise a little bit better, make their reps a little bit cleaner? Like that's all it is at the end of the day, because all you really can do is find the best program, the most close solution to what somebody needs, and
Hmm.
then find someone with the best genetics and the most will, and you're going to get, superstars, right? You're going to get top people.
Yeah, when you look at those all the different programming ideologies, right? I try to always have the conversation with kids that what you're looking at is descriptive, not prescriptive, right?
Yeah,
Like you're showing when you look at all those programs, you're seeing this is what they did to be successful, right? That was a big trap that I fell into. I read all that stuff. I thought that I was really well educated. I started making my own programming. A year later, I had a herniated disc, and my sports injury was, or my sports career was effectively done, right?
nice,
And
nice.
um, I learned later that like, okay, the stuff that, the Bulgarian team was doing or the stuff that the East German shot putters were doing was a system that they'd run, they had a tremendous amount of youth talent that went through sport development programs and then they come into the program in good shape and they have all the drugs in the world and I don't have those things. I played a lot of
Yeah,
video games and then just was good at it and
yeah,
not taking any drugs and
yeah,
so like it wasn't that it was like it wasn't that the workout concepts were insane. They were just insane for an out of shape high schooler who wasn't on a bunch of drugs,
Yeah, day
right?
one
yeah,
wasn't actually day one.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
That
yeah.
was like
totally.
year one, year three.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, so much of that becomes, when you're looking at programming for a person, it's, what kind of shape are you in? What are you good at? What are you bad at? Like how do we pivot to meet what you need, right? Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, make good choices.
There were so many things I learned, like having lived with the Bulgarians for a bit, and like just going, like when you're around a lot of this, like in the world of like elite Olympic weightlifting, like there's so many stories that are just not true. There's just so much like myth, like this
Uh-huh.
idea of like the selection of kids.
Right?
It's all bullshit.
Oh,
Like
really?
that was not happening. Like my friend Martin grew up in Bulgaria, and like they would make you do all these tests and all this stuff, and like
Hmm.
he was like, I did all the tests, like you run a mile or you like do the pull-ups and all these jump on a desk and all this shit, and he's like, and like the guy running the test is a you know
A
run
mid-level
not
actuary.
even yeah, he's just like a rundown old dude smoking a
Uh-huh.
cigarette, drunk, and he's like, oh, your dad's a good guy, you can go to sports school. Like it's like so much of this is like overblown, right? Like
Uh-huh.
because ultimately you don't need you don't need a lot of these tests, right?
Right.
The most accurate description to me was given by a guy who was a phenomenally talented athlete, was, you know, multi-time Olympic champion. And he was like, oh, they like put us in a class and we all lifted and they gave us pills. And then the top kids from that class went to the next one, which
Uh-huh.
was just a conglomerate of it's like American football. Like
Right, right, right.
the best kids go to the next group,
Right.
then
Right.
they get the
Uh-huh.
next kids, then the next
Yeah, yeah,
kids.
yeah, yeah.
Like that's a system. You don't need to like the Chinese myth of like, oh, we like you measure their limbs and watch this and that's like, no, you just put the kids in the group and you train them super hard and the top kids rise because that selects for all qualities you need, which is competitiveness and who's going to, you know, fight each other and who wants to
Right.
like push themselves, and also like an aptitude. The people with aptitude will do better and they'll have an easier time, where
Right.
this whole idea of like you're just going to like define the qualities you know are going to correlate. It's like the NFL Combine is not a fantastic predictor
Hmm.
of like
Right.
Right.
who's going to get the football into the end zone on
Uh-huh.
Sunday,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
right? But the guys who play football and win are probably a much better selector. So why do you even bother with the combine? You
See, and
know?
that was always something that I was really interested in because when I went through that reading, there was stuff in there that was labeled like Dr. Anatoly Bondarchuk. And I'm
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
okay, cool. But then it
yeah,
turns out it's transcribed, it's somebody else's impression of what he's doing in his program,
yeah,
right? And
yeah.
so I always wondered like how much of this is real and how much of it is noise. And then as I got older and met athletes and stuff who worked with him, it was like, oh, that was, it wasn't such a gross what's the word I'm looking for? Mischaracterization that it shouldn't have
Hmm.
been in print, but it certainly wasn't accurate. Like it was
Yeah,
describing a unicorn when he had donkeys or whatever.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it too is like a reverse of the actual like reality happens, then we look back and try to decide and understand why it happened that way. Like,
Hmm.
you know, like what made this guy so good, and you break it down afterward. But a lot of it is like, you know, okay, here's what we did. This worked for this guy. Let's look at similarities, and you just find like you ultimately end up in a place where you have to be principle based, right? What are the first principles of training?
Right.
And that's all you can use to govern your decisions, right? And how do those principles manifest themselves in a training program and a training system? And then, you know, the application of that is the end result, is the execution.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you find yourself changing? Like, have you been pretty consistent over, let's say, last decade? Like, we train our men, women the same way, or do you feel like do you mix it up, go
No,
stale, or
I definitely have evolved my training methodology over time. I would say I used to, a long time ago, I used to have like very sort of dogmatic ideas like, oh, weightlifters or powerlifters don't do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you go back 15 years, it's like, oh, running and lifting, like you'll never be in shape or strong that way. And now it's like there's so many people that, you know, run a marathon then squat 500 pounds or something.
Right.
And like it's obviously like it can be detrimental, but it's like this like interference effect of cardio and strength is so overblown in most cases, right?
right?
Yeah,
Um,
and yeah, we've had that conversation a lot with kids where they're like, I don't want to do the 15 minutes or the 20 minutes. And I'm like, you need to understand there's not really interference between cardio and strength training. There's interference between endurance and strength training.
yes,
And
yeah,
endurance training is something altogether different. That's a whole other animal that
yes,
we don't touch that with a 10-foot pole around here. So like
yeah.
it's
Well, and most of the kids that we wind up seeing, like, you're gonna be fine,
yeah,
even if you are a
yeah.
little
Yeah,
bit tired. Or
Right. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
like,
you're gonna
we're
be
getting
fine.
totally.
people that are at zero, and we're
Yeah,
just like I always tell people, I'm just trying to bring if I can get a kid to like 80% of his potential, I've done a good job.
yeah.
My classes are 60 to 90 kids at a time, so it's
Oh wow.
hard
Yeah.
to get any one person up there.
Like I see it like that, where it's like that was something I thought, okay, you gotta like, you know, don't do that. And then you kind of grow out of it and realize like that's not really that big a problem. But then like just a lot of things like that along the way to sort of kind of answer your question is like I've had ideas one way or the other. Then you start to realize like, you know, that's just not a proper application of that training principle.
Hmm.
Or a lot of the things I've changed my mind on are really like what I would call wishful thinking, where you just get stuck in this idea of like, I really want this one way of training to work, or like, I really think if we like do enough really heavy sets of 5, like that's going to make them stronger. And it's like, it's not. And when you're not, when you don't know why it's not working and you don't have a good grasp on the sort of like just logical reason why it doesn't work, you can just sort of look at it as like, I don't know, I mean, we need to do more of that thing because it didn't
Hmm.
work this time, but if we
Yeah.
do it harder and more of it, it will work. And like things like adding volume to a program is a great example of that, or adding intensity. It might have short-term benefits where it works and you start to be like, oh, well, that's it. But you may have just been training too little.
Yeah.
And now you're at this training, stimulus that's appropriate for somebody. But it's not actually any more effective. It's just like you were just so underdosed, or the other way around, where you're just doing so much that, yeah, if you drop the volume off, that's, just a better, it's just a better expression of the principle of fatigue management,
Yeah.
where I've definitely evolved in my thought process of those things, which is more like what can we do in a training program that's actually a better application of the principles of training, and not getting stuck on anything being like, this didn't work, we just need to do more of it or less of it, or it's, a bad method, right?
Yeah. Do you find that the athletes that you work with who are like real engaged with like social media and stuff have a harder time pivoting in their training when they need to?
I think there is a phenomenon that I've experienced more and more as time's gone on where, like, I trained with my coach for the better part of a decade, and it was really dumb training at a lot
Uh-huh.
of like
Yeah.
5 hours of maxing out your snatch, missing 85% of those lifts. But I stayed with him, one, because it was kind of the only option, but I didn't have a lot of I knew of other training systems at the time. It wasn't like I didn't know that other people did things differently. But
Right.
I was committed. I was bought in. I was like, this is what I chose to do. So I'm signed up to do, and I'm not gonna quit this and feel like, oh man, I can just quit anytime, because if I give up on this, like I'm just giving up. It just becomes an easier option to do that over and
Right.
over again.
Right.
But today you have this thing where it's like people get exposed to social media, they get exposed to an enormous amount of information out there at their fingertips, most of which is the same information just regurgitated, all of it designed to sell you something, whether it's to sell you a product or to sell you an idea or to sell you a follow. So like, this guy seems like it's worth following, so I can have clout. I have a
Right.
big following. So for sure, people that get sucked into that, they'll quit coaches really quickly. They'll switch programs. They'll constantly talk about how it, like, I should be doing better, this or that, or they're disappointed in a certain amount of progress because somebody else did better. And it's like, you have no idea the scenario, right? Like,
Right.
I
Right.
mean, I'm sure working with kids, I'm sure that like you probably run into situations where a kid will come in and be like, make a PR, and maybe it's whatever. They add 10 pounds to a bench press or something. And then they'll see, they can see anything they want under the sun. They can see a guy who benches 750 raw,
Hmm.
a chick who benches 300 pounds, guys that are, have a 60-inch chest and
Right.
25-inch biceps. And like, they don't understand what's really going on with a lot of that. They just see it as like, that's everywhere. I mean, like, every guy on Instagram is jacked, has abs,
Right.
and is incredibly strong and super athletic. So why am I not that?
Right.
Um, they just have no concept of what's going on behind the scenes. So it's like, for sure, you get this thing where the comparison becomes so toxic that like people's expectations or people's accomplishments mean nothing to them, because it's
Right.
like, well, I just saw so and so, my favorite, TikToker, just, is 10 times better than me, and I'm never going to get there.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about that just like last week. I saw an interview with Bo Nichols, and he was talking about his bench, and he's like, I don't bench. I could probably hit 225 for three, and the
Yeah.
guy was like, that's like probably in the top 1% of
Yeah.
Yeah.
humans.
Yeah. That's a strong
Like,
dude.
sure, if
Yeah.
we, like, I talked to
Yeah.
Kyle has a fantastic bench, and I'm like, if we took him to the world bench press championship, he's probably getting doubled up.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah. People are
he
gonna
Yeah.
laugh
moves
me out of the
by
building,
a
right?
lot.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. I'm
he's,
Yeah.
flirting with 500 pounds, and I show up, and Julius Maddox is there with 8, and it's like,
yeah,
okay, well,
Totally.
and
Right.
like,
you can always, there's
Yeah.
only one person
yeah, yeah.
that gets to be the best, which one thing that we're trying to do on the show is the random question of the day, which was my question. If you right now could press a button and be the best, the world's best at a lift,
Oh, we get to pick a lift?
Yeah, what would it be and why? You
The
don't got to train for
world's
it. Just right now, you're leaving the gym and you're going to be like, oh, you are now
the
the world's
world's
greatest
best at it.
at that lift.
Oh, that's a tough question. I
Obviously, I
mean,
just
Okay, so
weight class,
also I
weight
need to
class.
know as a follow-up question, I need to know how much the best. Like, do I get a half a
right.
kilo over whatever the existing world record is, or
You
do
tell
I
me.
crush it? Is it like 10%?
You
You
tell
know?
me. I mean, you can't be like you're going to go
One.
deadlift 1,500 now. Like
Oh, well, then what the hell?
you got to be
Uh,
the best.
I would say, I would say I'd want to be the best at something highly relatable so that people would understand it. We to Before I give you the answer, we once walked into a Home Depot, me and this other lifter, and he was wearing a shirt with the world record holder in the clean and jerk,
Uh-huh.
like the Olympic champion. And the guy behind the register, rubbed all six of his brain cells together, and he's like, "How much weight is that?" And my friend was like, "Oh, it's 586 pounds." And he literally, it's a cliche, but he literally was like, "Oh, that's all." It was kind of like, I mean, that's a lot of weight to lift
So
over your
deadlift
head.
is the answer. I want to
Yeah,
be the best deadlifter ever.
I don't know how much you've done, but that's quite a bit.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah,
hefty
yeah.
barbell, sir.
Oh,
I would probably say like the squat. I mean, the squat is so relatable, and a lot of people struggle with it, and it's the kind of thing where if you're the best in the world to squat, like that's pretty cool.
yeah,
It's
everybody
probably
that
the most
walks into a gym
universal.
knows that one.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I thought that's I was kind of leaning there.
I think that if we're doing a barbell, I think that I would actually go with the snatch, which is funny because
Yeah.
I'm not even, I don't, I had a phase where I really loved Olympic lifts.
Yeah.
And then after I got hurt, I still love training. And so the training economy kind of veered away from it because that disc herniation was pretty severe. I had like some partial paralysis
Oh,
in my leg and, pain and numbness and all kinds of things, right? And so I didn't do it really ever again. I never really got back to it. But I think that if I could whip, 550 or 600
oof.
overhead, I would be real
Yeah.
excited about that.
Th that's true. That'd be pretty cool.
I mean, it is
Yeah.
cool, but like Max was saying, like for most humans, above 200, people are just going to go, if they're weight room people, are going to be like, damn, that's a lot.
Yeah.
You're almost not going to get
Yeah,
a bigger reaction.
I
Like,
heard somebody one time say that it's impressive based on how close to or far away from 500 pounds it is. And as soon as
Hmm.
you cap that, nobody has any concept of what's going on
Oh,
anymore.
100%. I was just gonna say that. Like you bench 500 pounds and it's less good. It would be less good if you bench 550 or 600
Uh-huh.
because no one can relate to
it's
that.
not
Yeah, yeah,
even,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
Like same with squatting. Like if you squatted 550 with bumpers
Hmm.
on the bar, it's like infinitely cooler than, somebody squatting 800 with steel weights.
Yeah.
oh,
Like no one knows what 800 pounds is.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
But
It's, but
like
it does have a
405,
coolness
yeah,
factor of when
yeah,
I take some of the kids to like USAPL meets and then they go
yeah,
put the calibrated plates on. And we have some
yeah,
calibrated plates, but nobody wants to use those. Our bumper
yeah,
plates are extra thick.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Look like a
Yeah, it
howl.
looks huge.
And they
yeah,
go, it's just
yeah,
like,
Yeah.
they're like, is that a warm up? Like,
Yeah,
no,
it's
that's all you get, but that's
500,
it.
500
yeah,
pounds.
Those two
yeah,
plates is it.
yeah,
Look,
yeah.
it just looks
Now
terrible.
he's squatting 600 pounds right now, and it looks like
Hmm.
nothing. Yeah,
One, by the time the lift over, I'm sitting there going like, all right, that's 300 kilos, 300, 600,
yeah, yeah,
660. That's okay.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
All right. And then I look and like, oh shit, the
It's done. I
lift is
missed it.
done.
yeah, yeah,
I missed
yeah.
it. So one of the things that were really, huh? Oh, you
Well,
didn't answer. Yeah, yeah.
What's
What's your lift?
yours?
What's
Yeah,
your lift? I'm sorry. That was
well,
rude of me. That
it
was
was
rude.
it
I
was going to be
apologize.
squat and for the same reasons. Like
yeah.
everybody, you could brag, and that would be a house.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I'll go deadlift.
What
You know
did
what I mean? Like
what did
walking.
Vlad do in reps? 11 or
Oh, you're
13 or
going.
something
You're
crazy?
going. You can outdo like geared
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
That'd be
I
pretty
forget
cool.
Yeah,
I forget the Raptor. It's Vlad, but I can't remember what he did. At least I think it's still him.
what if it was like a curse though, and it's like you're the best at squat, but it looks like Dave Hoff squatting. So it's like 3.5 inches. It's like, oh shit, I didn't specify not multiply
Yeah.
and
I didn't
like
want to offend anybody, but that's literally the reason I didn't say squat because I've had a lot of people tell me they squat 600 pounds, then I watch them squat, and I'm like, oh,
yeah.
okay, yeah,
Yep.
nice, good job, guy. Um,
Totally.
so one of the things that we're really trying to get out of each episode is like some takeaways for like youth athletes and coaches, right?
Yeah.
And since we started about our own training experiences, like getting in the weight room and everything, I was kind of wondering if you'd want to walk us through like you know, I remember when I started training, it was like the question mark. Like I did it because my older brother did it. The
Mm.
coach, was very like in a way he kind of saved my life. He was like, if you would just pull your head out of your ass, this could pay for you to go to school wherever you want to go. You just got to get your shit together. And so that's kind of why I got into training and stuff. So like, it starts out you're really uncertain, you don't know if it's going to be good or bad or whatever. And then within 6 months I was the most self-centered, smug asshole on the planet, and I was going to be the best lifter, whoever, the best track athlete, whatever, right?
Nice.
And then, of course, there was a fall and, living in delusion afterwards and all that kind of stuff, right? So, like, uh, what was it like for you to go through, like, how do you feel like your feelings about yourself as an athlete, and were there like pitfalls that you made when you were competing that you think it's worth mentioning to kids to be like, hey, don't not listen to people. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's interesting. I had like the opposite experience because I grew up in a world where like my coach believed that anybody who walked through the door could be like an Olympic champion.
Okay.
He was just 100% in on everyone, no matter how bad they were. And like, he was just like, I'm gonna treat everybody the same. We're just gonna all train like that's what we're doing.
Right.
So my sort of biggest mistake, I think, back then we didn't video anything, so I had like no records of most of the stuff I did.
Hmm.
I just saw it as like, who cares? And like even a lot of big lifts, like I remember I front squatted 600 pounds, and I thought like no one cares about that number because it's not impressive.
But that's a
Um,
monster front squat.
that's a giant lift, yeah.
Yeah.
And you're thinking back on it, and you're like, man, why did I think my lifting was so bad? It's because I was just comparing myself to I was comparing
Hmm.
myself to like Olympic champions in weightlifting. And it's like, you're never going to be at that level. Like, you're never going to do a 400 kilo total. You're never going to snatch 400 pounds. Like, so like you have to like appreciate the numbers you did do, because
Yeah.
my numbers weren't really anything particularly, special, but they were like, they're decent and they're good. And like you'd have to be pretty athletic and work pretty hard to do those numbers today, even.
Yeah, I mean,
But
comparatively, a 600
yeah,
front squat is
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, and
and
oh, go ahead.
no. So what I was just saying is like I would have balanced my ability, my like, hey, take note of your accomplishments, celebrate them, and like understand that like that's actually like you've done big things, you've done good numbers, no matter how they are, right?
Right.
Don't like constantly compare yourself to other people and like cut it down a ton.
Yeah. It's real hard to win the comparison game because you
Yeah,
run into people who are so,
yeah,
specially equipped for a certain thing, right? Like,
yeah,
if you could get to where you've got like if you're a good sized person, if you can get to like a 1,600 pound total, you're a
yeah,
monstrously strong person, regardless
yeah,
of whether or not you're flirting with a world record or whatever, right?
absolutely.
And yeah, that is definitely something that people can lose perspective on. Or not, the other side of that is not realizing how long it took to get there. So
Yeah,
like when I first started training, again, it was for track, right? And so then I started comparing my numbers to other track guys. And so
yeah,
I'd meet him at gyms and I'd be like, or at meets and I'd be like, what's your squat and your bench and your deadlift? And I was like, oh my God, I'm
yeah.
never gonna catch these people. And then ended up, just 3 years later ahead of all of them, and so
Yeah,
it was just years. Like you just needed more time in the gym. And you also can never tell how far someone's going to go. Like you can have two
that's
people who seem super talented,
Oh,
and then
yeah,
as they climb, you're like, hey, they both got to a 500 for a double on front squat or 600 for a
yeah,
front squat or something. And then one of them just stops and
yeah.
never gets
yeah,
any better. And the other one just keeps inching forward, and you
totally.
don't know until you try. Like
Yeah,
there's
absolutely.
no way to get there.
Right.
Yeah. I think it was a big mistake to it probably very similar to today. Like I was just comparing myself to like these insane things, which were like it was weird because like you get this delusional state, like, oh, anybody can do those numbers. I'm just going
Uh-huh.
to do them, which is kind of a good thing.
Right.
But at the same time, it's also not paired with like a sense of like, hey, I just got to get to the next couple kilos, the next couple pounds. And like so you're focused only on the big number instead of the process, which just ultimately eats away at you and you feel like I'm never going to get there because I had to like kill myself to get 1 kilo on this lift. And now I'm like, how am I going to repeat that 58 more times or 100 more times to get where I need to go?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I know I definitely made the mistake of, the first 9 years or whatever that I trained. I was of the opinion that more than 5 reps was cardio,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you never needed to do it. It was a crazy thing, right? All the research says being strong makes you stronger. Let's just stick with it, right? But
Yeah.
that doesn't, I was mostly just training for myself. Like it wasn't the prescription that I would have given to somebody else. Like I was a lot more
Mhm.
measured when I was considering what other people were doing. But when it was just for me, I was just there to have fun and enjoy being in the weight room and enjoy training and everything. But while that worked really good for some lifts, like I remember even in like as a high school kid in my first year of lifting, I did 635 for a triple on deadlift. And
Damn.
that felt really cool. But the biggest bench I ever had was like 365, 375. And I
Hmm.
was kind of like every time I did a training cycle, it would be like, right there, mid 300s over and over and over and over and over again. And then I'd tear
Yeah.
something and I'd be done
Yeah.
lifting for a couple months and then I'd come back and do it again. And when I came back to training again after, all my kids were born and everything and I'd had a couple years off, I was like, okay, this time they had just reset all like the USAPL powerlifting records. And so in my weight class it was only like 1850. And I was like, I might
Nice.
have a shot at that, like I might be able to crank that out. And so I started right. Yeah, he knows me well enough to know that I'm insane and I'm never going to stay healthy for that long. But
You do have a shot at it if you can stay healthy.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Blow
But
your bones off.
I started training the way I would train somebody else. I was like, I'm just gonna swallow the medicine and do
Yeah.
the stuff that I would advise to somebody else. And in 6 months, I think I did like 440 on the bench. So it was 80 more
Wow.
pounds just because I added some real volume work and measured my rest and
Yeah.
took deloads and wasn't going insane every day. Like just doing the
So
good basic principles again, right?
totally. That's actually like the sort of essence of like the sort of like mantra of our company, and like the tagline is like winning doesn't happen by accident.
Uh-huh.
And so like this idea that like you could just kind of do the thing that you like or that you've known. A lot of people don't track anything. They don't keep track of any data. They don't like, you're not going to lose 10 pounds by like just kind of winging it.
Right.
Maybe you can, but like we know that like detailed, meticulous tracking, but also like method and practice, like that's how you do things, right?
Hmm.
Um, and like you said, like you just gave everybody the kind of good, solid programming you would do, and you put 80 pounds in your bench. That to me is the sort of like elusive, obvious as a concept. This idea that like the right answer is kind of right in front of you. It's
Yeah.
just you usually make bad choices around that answer, you know?
Yeah, because you get
Um,
so bought into whatever your ideal is,
yeah,
like you think like this is the way to do it or it's what I love or whatever. And there's a lot of, I don't know what it is, like loss aversion or something where people are afraid to try something new, that they're afraid to give up what they've been doing.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
kind of like how you're saying, like, coming from the same program, our coach was pretty powerlifting
Hmm.
heavy, and he liked the Olympic, but that was really like secondary.
Hmm.
We did
Mhm.
cleans, and he taught us
Yeah,
snatching,
we did
clean and
power
jerk, but
cleans and power snatches
right,
and
but
yeah.
Yeah.
it really wasn't his main thing. So really, like, until I was pretty far into training, like, I didn't really prescribe anything over a set of five,
Right.
for
Mm.
those. And then the first time I was like, all right, USAPL numbers have gone so high, I'm never making it to nationals, which was just every year when I was finally it was like 1300 and I was like I could make it this year. And then it was like 1350. It's like and it was like 14, now it's like 1670. It's like I'm
Yeah.
never getting that.
It's like
So
literally just like a couple kilos over your best. Like every time they just look for you, they're like, "What's he
yeah,
done in
yeah,
training?"
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. Where's Monroe
Plus
at? Let's
plus five on that. Plus five.
uh
Yeah.
so I was like, whatever, I'll try to get big. The
Yeah.
with the natural thing. I'll just start doing hypertrophy. And then it was the biggest bench I ever had. Like I started doing just volume, and
Yeah.
it was like, oh, I probably should have just been doing more volume instead of 4 sets of five. Who
right.
thought, who knew that you probably need
One
more bench than that?
one concept that I've kind of adopted over the last few years, having done all this like software stuff, is like, and I was actually talking about this morning with my business partner, like it's software has like tech and software has this interesting culture to it, which is like it's totally okay to be just fucking wrong, like really
Uh-huh.
wrong.
Right.
And you can just keep being wrong because you can just be less wrong every time.
Yeah, you
And
need to
so it's
fail
like,
fast. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. It's like it's better to just be wrong and keep doing things and then just like, okay, that was wrong. Let's be a little bit less wrong of that. And you're going to get so much quicker to the point of like a great product, or in our case, like a great training program, if you're okay with the fact that like this program I wrote is wrong. Everything about it's wrong in some way, and there can be some improvement. Because then you're never stuck on the idea that like I have the right answer.
Uh-huh.
Right.
Because then when you believe you have the right answer, you're not going to
That's
let go of
trouble.
it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
like that's
Yeah.
been so helpful in the training process for me.
Yeah, I mean that's literally like verbatim the reason I got hurt because I designed all this training around people who were in phenomenal shape and had access to their own private chemists, and then
Yeah.
everybody told me, like everybody was like, I
Yeah.
think you're doing a little too much, like your
Yeah.
deadlift went up 200 pounds this year, maybe you should just pump the brakes a little, and um, they didn't know enough about training to convince me that they understood what was going on, but I was so naive at the time that I didn't understand that they didn't need to, right? Like
Yeah.
injury happens when demand exceeds capacity, and anybody can understand that formula, right?
Yeah.
So you don't need to know all the magic of, Abajev and Bondarchuk and,
Right.
Boyd or whatever, right? Like you just need to not do too much. You need to wake up in the morning and not feel like you're dying, right? When you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You need to be able to continue this for a long
Uh-huh.
time.
Yeah, yeah.
The
Yeah.
longevity. Like that's what we talk about a lot of time is now, this is like a two-sided coin here. It's like even if there is bad programming, like whatever you're gonna do that's gonna make you keep coming back is probably gonna have the best results in the end because you've trained that way for years and years and years. So technically in that, like there's not bad programming, but gosh, have I run up against bad programming.
Yeah, I mean that's always dependent on your goals, right? Like if you
Right.
actually want to win, then yeah, there's bad programming. If you're just trying to stay healthy and be engaged and be
Yeah.
in the weight room and do stuff,
That was
then
one question we had for you at your level. Do you get athletes? It's different for us because most of the kids I get for the first time have zero
Yeah.
knowledge. Or maybe they have a dad that I have to break down some things that their dad did, or
Right.
our big argument is always, is the deadlift good or is the deadlift going to kill you because their parents, have
Right. Right.
things on it. So do you like get athletes in and they're like, this is what I've been doing. And you're like, oh my God, like what you've done this here? Like,
Well, I mean, yeah. First off, I try to find people that have no dad. That I find that easier to work with. Um, no,
that's a
the
whole podcast right there.
oh yeah, yeah. I don't know how I'd have daddy problems. I don't even have a dad. But the whole thing, like, yeah, it's like you'll find people. The biggest problem is you find people that are trapped in old thinking like that, where you come
Mhm.
in, they're like, hey, this is what I used to do. It worked well for me. And they never let go of the fact that, like, dude, that worked well if your definition of well is like the current state you're in, which is you're just not strong, you're not good at this. And so they have these like ideas like I have to do this or I got to do that. I've got to squat every day. Like I got into an argument, not argument, just sort of a disagreement with a guy the other day.
You stabbed him.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
He
It,
didn't
it
even get
wasn't in it wasn't
he
in
didn't get a
Russia,
talk
but
back, so it wasn't an argument.
there's a great story about Kirill Sarchev. Total tangent. Kirill Sarchev, you remember him?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
The one of the freakiest dudes to ever walk the planet.
yeah,
Bench press
he
holder before
showed
he
he
quit.
showed up in Australia and he was like gonna supposed to do the big dogs or whatever, and he's like
Yeah.
bleeding out of his pec, like literally bleeding from a knife wound that he got in Russia before he left. And they were like asking him like, what happened? He's like, oh, in bar, someone stabs me. And they're like, oh, what happened to him? He's like, finish, no problem. And he like did this like finger gun thing, finish problem. I was like, all right, sweet man. But yeah, so what was I saying? I was talking about
Not having a dad.
the
No dads.
not having a dad, and
Squatting.
that's really
You're arguing
yeah
with a squatter.
People coming in with
the,
bad plans.
Something.
yeah, it was the guy who came in. He was telling me about like, oh well, I squat every day, and it
Yeah.
worked for me. And I'm like, yeah, of course it worked for you because you squat 285 pounds and you squatted every day, and it got you to a certain number. And I was like, you can get to bigger numbers faster and in a way that you'll feel totally sustainable. You can do it
Mhm.
again and again. And it was like he didn't believe me.
Yeah.
And I was like, it's like 25 years of lifting, 28 years of training, having, like I can tell you, man, I think I've probably squatted every day more than anyone else in the world, except maybe some Bulgarian. It's like, it's not the way to go. Like, I'm just giving
Yeah.
you the advice right now. But it was like funny, like the guy's just like trapped in this idea because when you do nothing and then you suddenly start doing something that works, and then you start to think that's the formula.
Right.
You don't realize that like anything would have worked. So you just kind of got bought into this idea that like, oh, like, squatting every day, or 20 rep squats or whatever it is, that's the trick. That's the like secret thing. And it's like it's so hard to get people out of that because they've seen success with it. And they probably saw a lot of success. Because it's like
Right.
if you go from squatting 225 day one to squatting, 365 in 3 months, like you're just going to be like, well, nothing else is going to be as good. And that's true.
Right.
But it's like, that's also not the thing that's going to take you from 365 to 565, you
Yeah.
Right.
know?
It's also a great idea when it's a weight that's not going to fatigue you. Like that's a
Yeah,
different story when
totally.
you're going from 500 to 600 every day. Like
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
Absolute tonnage matters. Yeah, we were just talking about putting together some videos on training principles, and
Hmm.
I've seen the high frequency or everyday frequency thing work really great for people, but it's usually on the backbone of understanding like how it is that fitness decays and how you can
Yeah.
measure that, right? Because the thing that decays the fastest is technical proficiency, right?
Yeah.
So like if your movement is your specialty, you want to do it as frequently as you can because they can measure decrements in technical proficiency in like 24 or 36 hours, right?
Yeah.
And so if you suck at squats and you're well muscled, then a squat every day program might be huge for you for
Yeah.
the first 6 or 8 weeks or whatever while you learn how to be a proficient squatter, right? But
Yeah.
then after you've got your proficiency down, it's not that complicated of a movement. And, learning to get between the bar and the earth and then learning how to exercise some volition in your movement is like, those are the two things. And then once
Yeah.
you got those down, the everyday thing's not going to keep paying those same benefits.
Totally. And you end up in a spot where if you just step back and look at it objectively, it's like the benefit of like heavy singles on a regular bit, like high frequency, is that again, yeah, like you said, you maintain technical proficiency, you stay in touch with those weights, so your skill is very high. The downside is that there's zero flexibility in the structure to allow for any volume to be added.
Hmm.
So if you want to increase, muscle mass of any kind, like it's just not going to happen with singles.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
you won't be able to do enough. The other downside is you can be the greatest technical squatter on earth. You have incredible technique, but if you're not developing any basic strength, like you just can't, like you're going to be great and at the same weight for a long time. My
Hmm.
my squatting plateaued to a point where it was like I could go in the gym. There was a period of time where I was probably like 2012-ish, where I squatted 300 kilos at least twice a day, 6 months in a row,
Yeah.
like every day, five, six, this is like 6 days a week. I didn't train Sundays all the time. But like, yeah, I mean, it's like, but I didn't squat 320.
Hmm.
And it's like I've missed 320 every time I tried it. And it's like, yeah, like I could do the exact same number. I'm just at this awesome plateau where I can do all the things to preserve that one particular quality and skill, but like
Yeah.
you can't disrupt anything because as soon as you drop down to do more volume, you're so fatigued the next day is even worse.
Yeah.
And then this like disruption occurs. It's like, well, if you backed off and like squatted twice a week or 3 times a week, you could probably do a lot of that stuff and actually make tons of progress.
Yeah. And
right.
God forbid you get any like tendonitis or something, and then
Yeah,
the
it's
program's
over.
shot, right?
It's over. You just
Yeah.
end it. You just end it right there. You just unrack the bar and just free fall. Just
You're
All the
done.
way.
done. Done.
Did you ever have a time? Because this is something that I haven't found in very many people yet, but I'm really interested to see if you've ever had this experience. Have you ever done a workout that was so stupid and so demanding that like you went to get under the bar and literally couldn't unrack the bar the next time?
I've got two stories of that. So one of
Yeah.
one of them one of them was when I first started training with the Bulgarians. Like we lived in the house. I showed up, and this is like another good example of the whole like the myth of everything, and like what
Right.
you see isn't really true. The Bulgarian system is like, oh, he just ground everybody up, and everyone was just like, got destroyed. that's like true and not true because like that's an objectively true thing in all sports.
Right.
Like you could say American football like is way worse than the Bulgarian training system. How many dudes have permanent brain damage from American football, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
How
like
many
it's
people could
object
have a 20-year career if they
yeah,
weren't stomped every day, right?
right. So yeah, it was brutal and it was extremely hard and ground you up like physically and emotionally. Like you could take a month off and go get a job and do whatever you want, right? Like
Hmm.
you're it's not gonna like leave you permanently, disfigured. Um, but so I got there and this whole thing was I'm gonna do whatever they say. I'm just gonna train as hard as fucking possible. This is like the greatest coach on earth. So I just zero like backing off, no like self-preservation. It was like we're maxing out, like doing it. All the Bulgarian guys were just like, you're gonna die. There's a thing we all do that you don't know, and it's this word. They had a word for it, and it was like the idea of sort of like pretending like things are harder than they are, not doing everything you're told, secretly hiding, skipping things. And the word they had was it was called krushka. And and they'd be like, you have to be krushka. Like, and I was like, what is that? And he's like, it's kind of like imagine the coach asks you to like squat 250. Maybe you squat 220 and you tell him you did 250. But then it was like more elaborate than that because it was like these guys would do like because Abujayev was old, he's in his 70s, and he'd be sitting in the garage. He sat in the same chair every time, so he had one view of the garage, the gym.
Stationary camera.
Yeah, and so well, the benefit of that is like a 76-year-old man isn't really looking at both sides of the barbell when you're squatting. So like you would look, I'd watch guys like Nikolai would put like 280 kilos on one side or what looked like 280 on one side and put 200 on the other. So it
And then just
looks
get
like
in 6 inches off
it
center and
100%. It looks like 280, but it's actually 240. And he'd do that and he'd be like, oh, it's super hard and rack it. And then Abu J be like, okay, that's fine. Then you do the same thing on like a clean and jerk. Like it looks like 200 on one side, but it's actually like 170 and, be crooked and do the lift. And they would get to the point where it was like, they would like talk about these other lifters in Bulgaria. And they're like, oh, Angle Popov, he was like the greatest Krushka of all time. Like he would go in the gym and he would just vanish. He wouldn't be existing and like somehow he would never get caught. It was like they talk about it like this guy was the best in the world. Like he hid behind like a telephone pole, and like you couldn't find him. But then like I remember we were in the house one time and one of the lifters, Martin, my good friend, he called the house and waited for Abajev to jump up because he was going to wait for a call from his daughter. So he like ran out of the garage. Martin looks at me and he's like, come on. And he like, we load like 200 kilos on the bar. And then he waits for Abajev to come near the door, come back in the gym. And he picks up one side of the bar and he slams it down. And he steps back and stumbles back. And he's like, oh, like he just did a clean and jerk. And Abajev walks in and he's like, oh, what did you do? How much? He says, 200, but it was like a little bit hard. He's like, oh, that's okay. That's okay. That's fine. We'll be finished. It was like, this is the kind of shit that went on all the time. So I preface that to tell you the rest of the story, which is I didn't do any of that the first few months. And I was just like, I'll do anything. Yeah. What do you want me to do? Max out? Yeah, no problem. Just I'll as much as possible. There was a day I went in the gym. I probably front squatted about 220 at the time. It was probably like my max. And I went to the gym and I was upstairs and I was so sore. My legs were so sore. I couldn't unlock my knees to go down the stairs. So I had to like waddle down the
yeah,
stairs.
yeah, yeah, we've been
Like,
there.
and it was like the pain was like, it went from like a really, really sharp soreness to like, it was just pain. It was like,
Uh-huh.
I felt like I was being stabbed in the legs. And I tried to front squat 70 kilos. So I put 70 on the bar, I unracked it, and I went down and I stopped. And like it was the weirdest feeling. It was like my body was like, no, we can't go. Like there's nothing to
Yeah,
push.
yeah, no.
I couldn't do it. So I dumped the bar and he just looked at me like, well, you're just a quitter, aren't you?
Yeah.
Like you suck at
Yeah.
lifting. You just gave up on us. I had high hopes for you, but you're a
Why can't
nobody.
you be as great as all the other guys here?
Yeah. So put 70 back up, and I try it again. I make it, and then 120, and like I did that. All of them felt impossible. They all felt like maximum weights. Then I got to 210, and I did 210, and it was the easiest lift I'd done. It was just like nothing. It felt like
Yeah.
effortless. And then I hit like 230.
Yeah.
And it was like the weirdest thing where you're just like, I don't understand how that was possibly the case. But yeah, it was just like unbearable. And then the other time was when I was training at Cal Strength with Glenn. Glenn wasn't coaching me, but I was just trying to do. I wanted to do 5 sets of 5 with 272 or something for 600 pounds, and there was just like I did. I just did like 7 sets to failure or 8 sets to failure. I just kept missing. I would get like 5, then 4, then 3. And I was literally just going RPE
Right.
10.1 on every single set
90
until
second grinder.
until I accumulated whatever, 30, 27 reps or something. It was just so determined to do it. And the next day I couldn't do anything. Like I couldn't even get out of bed. I was so fucked up.
Yeah.
And it was just like that was probably one of the hardest workouts I ever did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've had I had a pretty extensive injury history before I ever got in the weight room. So like if I start talking about problems I
Nice.
got, they aren't from the weight room. I don't want people to get nervous about that. Most of them are just from me being a dumb kid.
Mr. Cofield,
Yeah,
he's
yeah.
had a lot of injuries.
Yeah, yeah. But I've long struggled with like my right knee, and sometimes I can kind of hobble together a good training span and get some decent numbers out, and then other times I struggle for a long time. But I really love training, so I was really trying to work on squat and fall in love with squat and make it feel good. I got super long legs. Squat has never felt good. I've never enjoyed squatting, right? And so I had came up with this plan one day because I was trying to avoid doing heavy weight because if I kept lighter, then I didn't have as much pain, So I was
Yeah.
like, I'm gonna do 15 sets of 15 with a minute strict rest with like 315 or something, right? And I was strict on the rest. I set the clock right in front of where I was squatting so that when that thing rolled over to a minute, I was going down again, right? Like I was not giving myself a ounce of wiggle room on it. And I got done with the workout and I thought that I was going to die by about set 6. And,
That's wild.
you're like time traveling after a little while. You're like, what is happening? And, so I got all done. And then I came up for, 5 days later was my next squat workout. And I couldn't take an empty bar out of the rack. Like
Oh my
I,
God.
I got under it. Like I wasn't even like I was super sore or anything. I just went to take the bar off and I was like, like
Yeah, it's like PTSD.
yeah,
My
yeah,
brain was,
Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah.
we can't start this again.
Yeah, I gotten so far down the hole that I could not bring myself to do it. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe if Abajay was there looking at me disappointingly, I could have taken it out, but
Oh man.
It's hard to lie when you're only at the bar.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. That's wild. Yeah. I mean, that's an insane. I've never even done anything close to that kind of volume. I
Yeah.
mean, that's
and that's
just
why
absolutely
every
ludicrous.
That's
months
why he
I'm
was
telling
shaking his head when
Cofield, like,
Yeah.
yeah.
well, you're always 6 months away from a Cofield injury.
Yeah,
Like,
coming or
either
going.
before or after. Like,
Yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah.
always somewhere
Yeah.
in there. I don't know why I keep tearing things.
I have literally never said I don't know why I
Yeah,
keep
that's
tearing
true, that's
things.
true.
I've literally every single time it's been like I was having so much fun. I didn't take a deload.
Yeah.
I
Oh
was
yeah,
supposed to have a week
totally.
off. I just kept training.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
don't think I did a deload that was planned in decades
Yeah.
until I finally got better at training. But yeah,
Yeah.
I just never thought. I was like, why?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
I'm training 52 weeks a year. We're getting better every day. And then we go like turn around and miss a lift 100 times.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, I literally feel like when we were growing up, deload week was like a set of 8.
Yeah.
It's like, no, it's just that's an 8.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
still as heavy as you possibly could do it.
Yeah,
But it was
yeah,
for
yeah.
8. Man,
Yeah. It wasn't a
it's
Yeah.
not
triple.
even that heavy.
Absolutely. I
All
feel
right.
oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I noticed like all these things that like all of us have gone through. It sounds like a lot of this like stupidity of like just trying to figure out how to do it. And you get a sense of appreciation for like, I know how bad that's going to be. I know how useless that training would be.
Uh-huh.
But it's like funny because it still doesn't go away. It's
Yeah.
still a thing that like exists in the zeitgeist of lifting and the fitness community of like all these weird things where it's like, as much as there's incredible amounts of knowledge out there, there's also just like so much of this like just pervasive stuff. And you're like, that's just like, how is that not dead yet?
Right.
But yeah, it's still there.
Well, I mean, there's just so many people that are rightfully trying to make a living off of it, and everybody's
Yeah,
got to be at least a little bit different. Like I tell that to my kids a lot because they're kids and they're all, no, why don't we do this or that? And it's like it's really the same thing. We're doing the same
yeah,
thing. They just have to change it by a tiny bit so that
yeah,
their channel is popular.
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
You know,
They
like,
got a different voice, a
and
unique
but
voice.
sometimes that goes in the wrong direction, and it's like,
yeah,
you know.
totally.
But for
Totally.
me, like my higher level powerlifters, when it almost always happens is, uh, juniors or seniors that have been with me for a couple of years, they always want to start programming themselves, and I'm like,
Yeah,
that about it. That's great. Like that's great. I'll usually look at it and tell them like, and the same thing. Like when I make a program, I usually will have like co-field, just something you're not missing or something you're not seeing, and sometimes they just come back with like the craziest things. I
Yeah.
had one of my best power lifters was like, she was like, why have you never shown me how like that you could squat and bench on the same day? I was just like, I didn't even say anything. I just said, hold on. And I went back through like messages. It was like
yeah,
6 months earlier, and I was like, you mean like that program right there?
This one,
Like
this
yeah,
one.
yeah,
that exact program that you just found on the internet and you paid some coach to do? Like
Yeah, yeah.
sometimes the kids just need to, I don't know everything, and
yeah,
the kids want to branch out, but
It's always my
yeah,
fun though, the homebrew things. It's like, hey, I've got 89 sets that affect my rotator cuff this week. And I'm like, okay, that's probably a bad idea. Like you might have,
yeah,
you might have a little too much frequency on one of those pushes or pulls because you're gonna
yeah,
not be having a good time.
yeah. That's one of those things too where I'll get it even like you get people that like you'll write a program and they'll do really well on it. And then they'll come to you and be like, I really want to work on some things. And you're like, okay, like what do you want to do? Like, well, like how do I fix like when I pull the bar off the ground, like I'm not tight. How do I fix that? And you're like just get tight. Like wait, like there's not a program to fix that.
Practice.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like there's like some of these things you just gotta try to do them hard, like with more intent. Um, and that's not everything, but it's like it's funny because they'll just like there's this belief sometimes that there's like some secret or magic or something like there's a thing I need to do to get better when it's like, a lot of times the program is fine and you don't need to come and mess with it because you just made a bunch of PRs, everything's working well. Let's do the same thing with maybe some small tweaks and do the next version of it. Versus idea like you have to like rewrite everything every time to
Right.
solve every issue you've had, which most of them aren't even actually that big a problem.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. It's amazing how many things can be solved just by actually just keep working out. Like just don't
Yeah,
stop.
yeah,
Like I had a few kids who were like trying to get my bench press secrets from me, right? Because
yeah,
that's the thing I've been able to stay pretty healthy on because when you're running around being a dumb kid, you don't often, have as many upper body injuries, right?
right,
So they're like, you got to tell me your secrets. And I'm like, I lift every 5 days and I work really, really hard. Like
yeah,
I go in and I train like if my life doesn't flash before my eyes, I feel like it hasn't been a good session. But that's also why I only do it once every 5 days, and that's what I like doing, right? I don't know that
yeah,
it's the best thing, but I enjoy it, so I keep doing it.
yeah,
And he's like, okay, well, I started doing this on bench. I would come up part way and pause, and then I would come back down again, and I would go back up and I would pause. I want to get through that sticking point. I'm like, just do more bench press. Like,
yeah,
stop,
yeah.
stop.
go through the sticking point.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, right. I just avoid the sticking point, see if I can get better.
Yeah, yeah.
I have a buddy help me out from here to here.
Yeah. So, in your training career, right? Maybe some unneeded comparisons, right? You started out thinking everybody can do this, high degree of
Yeah.
confidence, and then maybe came down a little bit as you move through it. When did you decide that you weren't going to that you weren't going to be competing anymore? Like, what was the?
Oh, that was easy. I destroyed my wrist. So I did a clean I tried to clean 175. It's a weight I'd done before, but I jammed my wrist and my elbow against my thigh with the
Mm.
ball in my
Oh
hand
no.
and dislocated the lunate bone. And then that wasn't necessarily the biggest problem. I dislocated the bone, and then to sum a really long story up, where I was working, the guy lied to me about insurance. We didn't have insurance at the time, and it was
Oh
like
no.
pre Obamacare. So I couldn't get insurance at a condition. So it took 13 months before I could
Damn.
get the surgery to fix the wrist, and it just the bone went necrotic, and that was that. So I just couldn't do the lifts anymore. So I was like, well, I'm a coach now.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
I
so
mean,
Still
that
bother
was
you?
easy. Oh, it hurts all the time, but it's like it'll probably be arthritic. It's funny because that was before I ever did any powerlifting. And I remember the first day I was like, I'm just gonna try to do something. And I started bench pressing and it was like it didn't hurt, but it allowed me to do it. And then I started noticing that like the more stuff I did with it, the less it bothered me.
uh-huh.
Hmm.
And eventually, like I was able to compete in powerlifting for, whatever, 10 years or something. And and it was like, oh, this is great. Like I can do something with the hand, and it's not weightlifting, it's not Olympic lifting, but like this is better than nothing. So that
Yeah.
was kind of the
It-
easy out.
It's kind of where I'm right now. I've been dealing with bad knee pain,
Yeah.
trying to
Yeah,
hope that it was something. It's a weird thing to say, but I was hoping it was something, and we got
yeah,
X-rays back, and it was just bone on bone arthritis. So I'm sitting here like,
uh,
well, if I'm in pain, not doing stuff, I
yeah,
might as well be in pain doing stuff, and at least be
yeah,
healthier. And I deal with
totally.
the knee pain anyways. If I'm
I
playing PlayStation, my knee hurts, so I might as
Yeah,
well just exercise.
you can be injured and weak or injured and strong,
Right? Yeah.
right? Like you might as well be as strong as you can.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, well, and I've noticed like I said, I've dislocated, torn or broken pretty much everything, right? So I've noticed that the stronger I am, the less I hurt.
Yeah,
I'm in okay shape right now. I have no pain. And if you I mean, I've seen the x-rays of my hip. I know what's going on in there. It's not good. And so the fact that it doesn't hurt at all, and I can squat and
yeah.
deadlift and have fun lifting weights and playing with my kids, like I try to get everybody like you can like if you go looking for defects in a body, if you throw everybody in
Oh
a
yeah,
CT scan, you're going to find a
yeah,
thousand of them, things they don't even know they
yeah,
got, right? So just because
yeah.
you got something wrong doesn't mean you have to be in pain.
It's probably a
Totally.
bad idea.
Yeah.
Even on that X-ray, I was looking. I was like,
Oh, you
"Why
don't.
are my femurs so small? Like, do I have a bone problem?" I was getting worried. Those things were like the thinnest femurs I've ever seen.
Yeah, you don't want to actually discover what's really going on in
No,
there,
it's
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
This,
crazy.
sir, that's where your tuberculosis is, but your AIDS is over here. Um, like, yeah, you don't want to dig too deep,
Yeah.
just surface level,
Uh-huh.
just close.
Yeah.
But I think that's something that a lot of people, like general population people, don't have any good handle on what it feels like to be strong, like to be
Hmm.
physically strong. And it's not like you have to be crazy levels of strength. You don't need to
No.
have a 300-pound squat is like very, very strong for most people. But like what you feel you can do being strong is so just like such a great feeling. Like when you go to like move stuff around or pick something up or do your normal everyday stuff, like that added physical strength is so beneficial that, and not to mention any of the health benefits, just like the ability to manipulate your environment. It's kind of wild that you wouldn't want to like pursue some of that on some level, you
Yeah,
know?
and just the like internal physical feeling of like when you're
Yeah.
strong, like you feel invincible,
Yeah.
like not even like to the point where you're like, oh, I'm the strongest guy on the planet and you're super cocky about it or whatever, but you just feel like,
Right.
oh, if I was walking my dog and I slipped on this muddy hill, I wouldn't be wrecked for 9 months. Like you
Yeah.
feel like you're
Totally.
gonna be okay living your life,
Yeah.
right?
And you also get a little bit of that smugness knowing you're better than other people. So that's
Right.
Yeah, yeah,
nice.
yeah.
You
Lean
can
into
kind
that,
of
guys. Lean into the smugness.
There's nothing
keep
wrong
that in
with
your
that.
pocket.
So was moving out, was it like, because, mine was a traumatic injury, right? Yours was a traumatic injury. So that was kind of like the end of like seriously pursuing the sport that I was passionate about. And for me, I lived in delusion for a long time that I was like, because I'd had so many injuries before, I was like, this isn't going to be a big deal. I'm going to get back into shape. Like I can still use up my NCAA eligibility.
Kyle is still fully in these delusions.
Still,
Just so
100%.
we get that
Everybody,
clear.
yeah,
Like,
for all the listeners to understand,
he still
I
knows what the Olympic qualifying total is to
and
every.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
will continue to do that until I die. All right. So like I want to get that out on Front Street. But like I remember going for a while just being like trying to find anything I could do, like to train around it, to shorten my windows, to periodize differently. Like it was it had become a really big part of my identity, because I was a kid who didn't have a lot going on, as a young guy. And so like having some success here and opportunity was like I really grabbed a hold of it, right? And so it was weird to let go of. and it didn't cost me any issues in life, but I've seen other people that it has cost them, like that has cost them real opportunities because they were making poor choices trying to feed the delusion.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I when I hurt my wrist before I had surgery on it, there was a few months after, I feel like maybe like 6 weeks after, 7 weeks after, I was like, well, I got to start training again.
Yeah.
Even though my wrist was the size of a fucking softball, it was huge. And I snatched 130 kilos with a broken wrist because I was
Yeah.
just like, all right, I'm just training. That's gonna get back there. Um, so like that was the extent of it though, because I quickly realized like this is kind of done. And there was a period of months where I was really depressed. I didn't know what I was going to do with myself
Yeah.
because like everything in my life had taken this moment of like I'm going to try and go to the Olympics, right?
Right.
Hmm.
Um, like I didn't have the talent even close, but it was like I want to be as good as I can, and then suddenly you're like you can't even do it anymore. But I also had the benefit of like there was people I had seen and known that had done exactly what you said, where it's like you could see they'd never let go of something,
Hmm.
like to not say who they are or whatever, but like there's like these people just held on forever, or they held on to something that was taken from them. Like you can't go to the Olympics because they boycott the Olympics, so it's like you never get over that one thing in your life that just causes you to be miserable.
Yeah.
Like I knew that I didn't want to do that, so I had to like make peace with it and move on,
Hmm.
and be like, all right, I'm not gonna, I mean, I still like think in my mind sometimes like maybe I could make another PR lift or something here and there, but it's like, that's a more of just like a sort of just daydreaming, kind of laughing about it. But I had to get to that point where I was like, no, I've got to like let go of what I did, and kind of move on from there. And I actually had a really cool experience with, you remember Misha Koklayev?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I met him. He came here and did some seminars in California, and I met him, and I went up to say hi to him and like introduce myself. And he's like, "Oh, I know who you are. Like I saw your videos. You're the 0 to 600 squat, like." And he's like, "I know you hurt yourself." And he's like, kind of had this moment. We talked for a few minutes where he's like, I couldn't get the Olympic team in Russia, but I still had all of my like accomplishments. And he's like, I rested on that. And he was like, you have to do the same. And he's like, you should think about all the things you've done because no one can take that stuff away from you.
Yeah.
And that was like a really amazing moment for me because I was like, wow, like you know, what a cool thing to like hear from somebody who I see as like infinitely more accomplished than me.
Oh yeah, he's a
But
monster.
yeah, but like could say this stuff that's like, yeah, you have to like look at the things you did that were great and recognize that, and like, whatever is, and just move on. Like you can't sit there and dwell on it or try to chase after it, or like you're gonna come back and do X, Y, and Z, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of like how you were saying, like your immediate goal was the Olympics, like which
Yeah,
is a great driver, but for almost every human is not even
yeah,
and that's it's a hard thing, and I struggle that. I'm also a football coach, and I struggle a lot of some people just want to tell kids like, you can do everything, everything is possible, and I'm really not that way. Not that I sit there and crush dreams or anything, but like Arnold Schwarzenegger looked better than you at 15 than you'll ever do if you take steroids for 400 years.
yeah,
You're just not the right person. Ronnie Coleman
Yeah.
at least claims like clean and wasn't even interested in bodybuilding. He
Uh-huh.
just wanted a gym membership and he wins freaking the Olympics.
yeah,
Like there's just some people that
yeah,
there are strong humans and then there's
Hmm.
mutants and there's,
Yeah, and it's hard to be honest with yourself when you're going through the process because like I was really surprised when I started training to find out how well I responded to training. Like the
hmm,
entire time I was if I'm healthy, it's like 20 pounds a week and I'm having a great time. But again, I'm
wow,
only ever 6 months away from an injury, right?
yeah,
And I'm so busted up that it's really just more pissing off scars from when I tried to jump into a quarry when I was 10 years old or whatever.
Jeez.
But I am clumsy as fuck. So like, I pick track and field as the thrower, and it's like you got to get in and actually like learn how to push a shot put. And
Yeah,
I'd throw 100 times a day if they'd let me, and made almost no progress in terms of like getting better at the actual event. Like power and spades like all the
Yeah.
speed and strength that anybody would ever want, but like I didn't have the talent, like the athletic talent, you know?
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a thing that to me, like I realized the most important thing. I tried to do this with I had a client that came to me recently and it was like, you could see this person was like gonna get trapped really quickly in their thinking because they're like focused so much on the goal
Yeah.
and like they had no concept of like this idea of like process orientation, which is like you should be focused only on like are you doing the things, the boring basic things every day really well, and like
Hmm.
it's an execution game because it's like if you came in and you could get somebody to buy into the idea that hey, today I just have to like make sure I do all my reps really high quality, make sure I am sleeping well, all these little things that aren't flash or exciting, but those build up to something else and get your mind away from the end numbers, the end goal, like you'll progress way further and you'll be in a place where it feels sustainable where the same thing of like yeah just being obsessed with the end number the end result and like where I can get to and like fixating on what other people are doing is just so it's so non-productive
Hmm.
for anyone especially young people when they first
Yeah.
get into it because you're just trapped in that every day I work out I do something I didn't hit the number I thought I would I'm not going to get there, or my technique sucks because I'm not doing XYZ. And it's like, well, all these things are very, very fixable. They're just little steps, though. It's lots of little repeatable
Right.
steps to
Right.
get better.
Yeah. Yeah. So do you think it's valuable to have conversations with athletes like, hey, sport's not going to be there forever. Think a little bit about what you're going to do after? Or do you think it's a better conversation just to put Koklev's advice out there and
Yeah.
just be like, celebrate what you've done, figure it out later, you know? Or maybe he wasn't a
Yeah.
figure it out later guy, but you know,
I, yeah. I mean, I think it's kind of I definitely have had that conversation with my better athletes I've worked with. Like they were the people I'm thinking of, like they were already had their shit together as people, but it's
uh-huh.
like a lot of it's like, look, everything you're doing now is going to disappear so much quicker than you think and so much sooner than you think. And it's like you might be like unstoppable today, but like there's a better person coming up there's a competition you're not going to win. There's the never quite getting back to the same level. Like, and you have to accept that. Like,
Right.
you're just not going to win forever. And so, like,
Right.
you should take your victories, and you should definitely have like don't overstay your welcome. Kind of like have a plan to be like, okay, I'm going to accomplish these things, or by this date or by this event, I'm going to move on to the next phase of my life or my next thing.
Yeah.
And that's fine to like you know, if you're starting as a master's or something, like this is not applicable, right? Like if you're starting this as a hobby, it's like you could just keep going forever, like do what you're doing. But like if you're young and you get into any competitive athletics, you're gonna want to have an understanding of like at some point it ends. So do everything now in the way that you need to do to get as good as you can. And just be ready for the time that like, hey, this might be the end, and that's
Hmm.
okay.
Right.
Um,
I feel like it's
yeah,
especially brutal in weightlifting. Like in powerlifting, worlds happens once a year.
yeah,
So whenever you are at your peak, that window is there that year.
Hmm.
Whereas like if you just happen to be, your peak is 2 years in between the
oh
Olympics,
yeah,
that's just
yeah.
like
Yeah.
how many times has
Yeah.
that happened to people? Or it's like,
Oh, the Olympics is like a timing thing. Like a
Hmm.
huge part of it is when you're born
Yeah. Yeah.
and when
Yeah.
you start. It's like if you're going to be just too young at one Olympics, and then by the time you get to the next one, it's just like you're kind of like in the middle of the pack again. Like, yeah, the Olympics is just a weird thing. It's so hard to do, and you don't know. Like, you could get close and then all of a sudden like the qualification process changes
Yeah.
and you're behind two other people you didn't think you'd have to compete against because you're competing against every weight class at that point.
Right.
So it's like there's three spots and you've got to beat 25 people that want those three spots. So yeah, that's such a painful thing. It's even harder in other sports. Weightlifting, at least we send, a few like shot put. Like that's not, I mean, how many top shot putters does the US have, right? I
right.
mean,
All of
you've got
them, literally all
yeah,
of them.
right. So it's like you're the one going in. It's like you got to beat every other dude to get there.
Yeah, right now
Um,
the best shot putter ever is Ryan Krauser, and the second
yeah,
best shot putter ever is Joe Kovacs, and they're just
yeah,
they're competing at each other every time, you know.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, and I mean, Kovacs is another good example of somebody who's freakishly strong. But yeah, it's like, you
Yeah,
know,
he's got to be one of the biggest engines to ever do a
oh,
power sport,
dude,
you know.
yeah. I saw a video he did with I don't remember who it was. It was the Rogue facility. He said he jerked 275 from the back,
Yeah, I
which
believe it.
is totally, yeah, totally
Yeah.
believable. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, it's like just giant number though,
Hmm.
and probably really rough, which is even better,
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
you
yeah.
know?
I would have loved to have been in the room and been like, "Am I
Oh
safe
yeah.
20 feet away? Like, is this where I die?"
Yeah. Right.
Do you feel like
Uh,
weightlifting is gaining popularity? Like we feel like powerlifting has had a big push.
yeah.
Really, I feel
I,
like 2018 or 2019, but
I
COVID's
think,
probably
I
been
think it's a tough question. Like I always ask myself that because like we do a ton of weightlifting. I feel like it's just been very stable for a long time. It's always got like a certain percentage of like it's probably growing, but it's growing very slowly, where it's like it maybe is like pretty flat. Um, I don't know how much bigger it is now than it was 5 years ago, but like 15 years ago, it's way bigger than that. So it's definitely grown, but it's hard to say exactly like, it's not like powerlifting where powerlifting has exploded.
right.
Hmm.
So many people do it, but it's also got super high churn. I mean,
Yeah.
some people are in and out in a year,
Right.
right?
Yeah, it's
Um,
really hard, to get yourself ready for three maxes, right?
yeah,
Like as much as it doesn't sound like a trivial or sounds like a trivial thing to do, like you're just gonna go in and do a squat, bench, and deadlift. I can't
yeah,
tell you how many times I've been excited for a meet and been like, oh, I guess this is a push pull, or oh, I guess I'm not going,
yeah, yeah,
and it can be really difficult to get yourself in shape and stay healthy and
yeah.
do all those
And
things.
made even worse when you look in the audience, you don't see your dad there. You remember he's never
No
coming,
dads.
right?
You should
Yeah,
see
I mean,
Max.
It's an
it,
audience full of single moms,
if only it was that good.
single
The
grandmas. Where do we go with this, Max?
just other powerlifters.
Oh
It's
yeah.
it's all multiply. You wake up. That's how you died and went to hell. Is you wake up and you like wake up and you're in the squat rack and you look around and you're like, oh my god, and you realize you're in a multiply powerlifting meet.
Yeah, am I wearing canvas briefs?
I,
Oh,
I am that person. I'm the worst thing there is. No. Yeah, it's like I don't know why I rag on multiply. It's not even a thing anymore. I feel like no one even does it, but
it
Yeah, it's
Raw.
really.
It was really big there, and
yeah, it's
but Raw
huge in
just
the
made
Yeah.
beginning.
such. It's being Raw powerlifting is so much more accessible than almost
Yeah,
anything else.
Yeah, it's
Like
yeah,
yeah, I think a big part of it is accessibility, and I think another big part of it is just what the athletes look like. Like,
yeah.
when you're trying to fill out a suit, like if we had when we had some bench shirts in our gym, but it was like pre Ninja, so it was like pre
Oh wow.
2003. So they're they add 15 pounds or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And
they
then
were $8.
yeah, $8 bench shirts. And then everything else comes out and you start to realize like, the puffier I am,
Yeah.
the more I get out of this thing, right? Like how much salt and Oreos can I do before a meet, right?
Yeah.
And then you show up and everybody's like, that guy's purple and he looks like he's gonna
Yeah.
die.
Oh man. Those are the good old days though.
The good old days.
It it's funny because like you talk about the raw stuff, like it is amazing how easy it is to get in and get really good super quick because there's so many great coaches. Like the quality of coaching and powerlifting is extremely high compared to
Mhm.
where it was. The accessibility to information, apps, programs, all this stuff is it's so high and so up there that like you could get in and within a year be doing really good total that would have taken most people 3 or 4 years before all the pitfalls.
Yeah.
But then the second you get an injury or the second something happens, there's a setback, they'll quit because it's like the rise was so easy and rapid that as soon as anything is slightly difficult, they're just out because it's like,
Right.
well, I don't even know what to do. I don't know how to deal with this. So I'm just
Be
going to do
also the
something
first
else.
time you ever go like, oh, I'm getting pretty strong. I'm gonna look at last year's nationals.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Or
My
you go to a powerlifting meet and you run into
yeah,
some real mutants for the first time. You're like,
right.
this,
Yeah.
I'm benching 275, I'm squatting 405, and then you go run into
Yeah.
somebody who you've never heard of, you never
Yeah.
met, never seen, and he's in cranking a 700-pound deadlift in jeans after work, and it's like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
there's levels to
It's
this.
different. There's
Oh yeah,
types of people.
that's so true. So
Yeah.
true. And in powerlifting, especially, you just get people come out of the woodwork. Like
Uh-huh.
just out of nowhere, there'll be somebody just like freak that shows up and they have some giant lift and that's that. And then like, a year later they're getting beat by someone else. Just
Yeah.
Right.
constantly. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you transition from like being an athlete to being a coach, like, was there any like really dramatic reframings of how you saw your training history once you started working with athletes?
Yeah, the biggest thing that happened to me was when you start charging people money and you start
Uh-huh.
making a living off of it really quickly, you that is a it's so quick to be like, oh shit, this is not working because people are quitting,
Right.
right? And you're like, okay, I got to do something that works. And like everything shifts gears from like what we're supposed to do or what you think you're supposed to do to like what you have to do to actually keep people making progress and keep them going and keep them there. And that was like the fastest learning curve for sure. It was like, shit, these programs are not working. This isn't going to work with people. What I did was really dumb. We got to do something different. As far as like, I knew it wasn't that great a training. Like I was very well aware of like what existed. I mean, I read like all the time. I was always reading training books and this and that. And so like I knew of every other kind of training style and system, but like I would still do the Bulgarian stuff because that's what I did coming up.
Right.
But with clients, it was like really quickly, you're like, oh, this person's 45-year-old woman. She doesn't want to do 7 days a week of
That's
snatch and
Not every
clean.
day.
my very
Yeah,
first client. I started him off
yeah,
just hard as hell, and I always remember being like, this guy sucks. He never wants to come train. He would just pay me. I was working at the gym, and he would just pay me and not show up.
yeah.
And then
He's
when I got
afraid of
older, I
you.
was like, dude, I really sucked as a personal
Yeah,
trainer.
yeah,
Yeah,
I really should
yeah,
have probably changed that.
yeah. I
yeah.
remember some things like when I was lifting, I was really big again on like volition, like just trying hard.
Hmm. Yeah,
And as soon as I became a coach, I was like, I'd watch people lift and they'd be trying really hard, and I'd be like, "You are doing it wrong. Like, stop moving like that." Like
yeah,
I got really concerned about quality of movement and quality of work and all that kind of stuff.
yeah,
Like once I started telling other people what to do, and I thought
yeah,
that was a really interesting switch.
yeah. The other thing was like coaching. I didn't get it because my coach was like that, but like so much of coaching is about the rapport between you and the athlete. And it's like no one, the famous quote of like no one cares how much you know until they know how much you care.
Right.
Is so true because like no one really, you're not going to like win someone over by showing them how much you understand training, how good you are at that. You're going to win them over by showing them that like, hey, like I really think if we do these things, it's going to make you better. And I've been thinking about the way you train and like
Yeah.
actually connecting with them as a person. So that's a huge thing where it's like it's so easy where I think of it as like the programming and the actual like technical side of it is like the end of the thing. It's the cherry on top. It's like that's really exciting and interesting and fun for coaches to think about and do and explore. But everything building up to that is about like building a communication and rapport and like showing up and like being a good coach who's a person who's good at communicating and can demonstrate that they care about your progress, your results, what you're doing. They can have a shared vision, which is, hey, you want to compete at nationals? Like, I want to help you compete there and I want to share in that journey. And then on top of that, you're like, hey, here's what I think is the best strategy. Maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong. Like, we're going to modify this as we go, but this is what I think is the thing that's going to help you most.
Yeah.
Um, that's like the essence of it. And it's like when you come from a system or a place of like, coaches just being like, this is the program, do it, it's dogma, then you never really get that as much. You're just kind of stuck in that place of, programs and whatever it is, a method or something.
Yeah. So if you're if we're talking to like a 17-year-old wrestler right now, just found a sport and they want to be great at it, how do our athletes, because so much of the onus for that is on the coach, right? Is to check in
Mm-hmm.
and talk to them. So if you were going to give advice to, a young athlete who's just discovering a sport or whatever, what would you tell them to do to contribute to that kind of relationship? Like who have you had the best relationships with? The
I would,
easiest relationship.
yeah, that's a good one. I would say to a young athlete, like, you get out of this process what you put into it. So you've got a resource and a coach. There's a person who clearly cares about what you're doing, has the knowledge and has the experience. And imagine where you could be if you stood on their shoulders. So it's
Yeah.
your job to find a way to give them the best opportunity to deliver you to where you belong, right? So, you know, find a way to participate in this process.
Yeah, I've had a lot of kids who I've talked to where they come to me and they're like, Monroe does football also in addition to the weight
Mhm.
room, right? And they'll come to me and they're like, Monroe is being a real asshole, and I'm like, Monroe gets paid 50 cents an hour and donates his entire life to helping
Yeah.
you on the field. He wasn't being an asshole. You weren't doing what you were supposed to be doing. Go talk to him
Yeah.
about it, and then
Yeah.
by the end of their relationship, it's all, it's repaired and everything. But like, I think it's real important for, if you're an athlete to understand that like coaching's a hard career to do. You know,
Yeah.
it's not
It's
it's not forgiving,
I'm gonna need to know what kid said that.
So they're running laps on Monday.
Uh, so one thing, like, obviously, I feel just like we've talked, like I've learned a lot over the time, but I still am in the realm of I try to still research what's going on, what are people figuring out, and eventually it trickles down to us at the high school level. Like, but it does seem like people that I get to go meet, let's say it's at a conference, a lot of times I get more opportunities as a football coach than necessarily there's a bigger budget for football than there is for
Mhm.
powerlifting.
Yeah.
So I get to I get to speak with a lot of football strength coaches, uh, and a lot of them have different beliefs. How do you feel as like the Olympic lifts like backward? So obviously it takes a really good athlete to be good at Olympic lifts. What about using Olympic lifts for athleticism? Like is it worth to learn to get really good at the snatch to become more explosive? I Our kids aren't necessarily, I don't get them for that long. So I teach them the Olympic lifts, but I don't know if we ever get good enough. Like I always, and then you'll hear one person's like, "Oh
Yeah.
my gosh,
Can I
spend all your time there."
can I volunteer an answer so you can tell me how wrong I am?
Yeah.
Okay. So
I hope you're so wrong.
yeah, I love this. Yeah, yeah. I mean, well, that's why we got you here because you're you've been doing this a long time. Um, so I after I got hurt, I became really obsessive about training economy, right? And
Yeah.
like what do you get out and what do you put in and how much can you put in and how much can you recover from and where do you get the most bang for your buck and everything, right? And I I mentioned on our first episode, I got really obsessive about jump training. And because of the back injury, I wasn't doing any cleans or any snatches. And I had. When I first started lifting, I had like a 19 to 21 inch kind of vertical. I did a bunch
Mhm.
of Olympic lifts in my training because that's what all the East German throwers did. And so I was going to keep that up. And it moved quite a bit. It moved up to, like getting stronger and learning how to jump and all that kind of stuff moved me to like 32, 33 inches. And that felt great. It was fun to be able to play basketball and do all this stuff, right? But when I wasn't able to do them anymore, and I took that training volume and I split it into either like real plyometrics or real strength work, then I went from 32 or 33 inches all the way up to like 39. And getting to
Mhm.
39 inches was like that felt like a monstrous achievement. Like I was really, really, really proud of that. And I don't think that I ever would have got there if I had that training volume still locked up in cleans and snatches. I think that it's a great like a tool to teach kids how to solve movement patterns because you do have to think about, I'm moving, I'm moving, I'm moving, I'm moving. Like there's phases to the lift, right? Like the first and second pull and the drop and the catch and the front squat and then all the step, right? And I think that's really super valuable for kids to learn, but I don't know that you get as much training product out of it as an athlete as if you put that economy somewhere else. So
Yeah.
that's my opinion. So tell me if I'm
I,
wrong.
no, I would agree with that 100%. I mean, I've coached so many people as weightlifters, and I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with teaching people how to do the lifts in an athletics, like a team sport kind of setting. Again, though, it comes into what you say. It's like you are a great example where it's like you moved your vertical from baseline to a decent, respectable number, and then moved it to an exceptional number with totally different means.
Hmm.
And if you want to be more explosive, like sure, some cleans and snatches or whatever would do that for you if you're pretty new to lifting. But like the effect is probably just like a symptom of being stronger and learning to coordinate an effort
Right.
under load. Where like if you really want to become explosive, you have to jump. Like
Yeah.
plyometrics are it's undeniable. It's also like you said, like training efficiency, where it's like, what is the cost of exhausting yourself with one form of movement or one thing that you miss out in the next, right? It's like
Yeah.
you're never going to like squat your way to a faster 40-yard dash. Like it's just
Right.
not going to happen.
Yeah.
Now, the same with shot put is a great example. You're never going to bench press yourself to a certain distance, right? Beyond whatever it is, like 60 feet or something.
Yeah.
Like,
You still
like,
have to learn how to do
yeah,
the event. Yeah.
yeah. Like if you want to get better and throw the shot further, you have to specialize and do more special exercises, the heavier shot, lighter shot, whatever. Same with this. Like I think it's fine. Like power cleans in my mind are a good option for people that like you want something that's more dynamic than deadlifts and squats. And it's like a good exercise for kids to learn because one, if they have to learn it or do it later, you want them to be safe. If they have to do it in some college program, whatever. But from a like total training efficiency and training economy standpoint, like you're wasting energy doing stuff that's like just not super effective at the thing you want.
Yeah,
Um,
that's kind of the way we looked at it. Me and Kyle have kind of been on the same page for a long
yeah,
time, but just because two guys are on the same page doesn't mean you're right.
Yeah.
Uh,
yeah.
and I
Well,
just look at it as like, yes, I'm a football coach, but I do teach all the kids. I'm the school strength coach, so I want kids to get a taste of everything. And like
yeah,
last year, we had a kid that got really into Olympic lifting, like he
yeah,
really liked it. But I do want them to. I know that recruiters ask that number,
yeah,
so I don't want my kids to be like, I've never done the clean.
Yeah.
yeah,
It's like, all
yeah,
right, well, they were
Because
maybe neck and neck with a kid, and they're the ones not gonna go to college because
you just tell them 150 and hope they assume kilos.
I mean, that's a good example of where it's kind of unfortunate. It's like you're gonna have to teach a kid to do something they don't really need to do. It's not gonna drive progress
Hmm.
in order to potentially get them to, the next phase of their career.
yeah, we talk about it. Our classes aren't that long, and we
Yeah,
talk about the combine lifts and how much time should I practice teaching a kid to go out of a 3-point stance in the 40.
yeah,
Their 40 time is going to be better, but that has
yeah,
nowhere else is that ever going to happen.
Right.
No, and if you are fast, I mean, look at like John Ross ran one of the fastest 40 times ever, but he can't handle it if someone's just standing in front of him
yeah,
because he's used to just doing that.
Right.
yes,
So
yeah,
but the strength coach is often selected by the football coach.
yeah,
So when you go get that big job and you're all of a sudden you're Alabama strength coach, are you going to make waves or are you just going to do the power clean and teach 40s and
yeah,
make sure you keep getting your $600,000 paycheck? Like
Yeah.
there's only so many of those jobs unless you're an entrepreneur
Right.
that
yeah,
that this profession pays. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think
Totally
like
true.
looking at like um we often mix things up too, right? Because you can train for endurance and you can train for strength and you can train for speed and you can train for power. And training for power isn't the same thing as training for speed or training for strength.
Yeah,
And, it's pretty clear that if you want to be good in an event that's at 13 meters per second, you need to be training within 10 or 20% of 13 meters per second. And
yeah,
so as much faster as a clean and a snatch are than a squat or a deadlift, they're still only 2 meters a second, you know?
yeah, yeah,
They're not shot put speeds or sprint speeds. So
yeah,
like, like
exactly.
if you want to load up on a power event, you should try to have loads that match those similar
right.
ratios for velocity and stuff, you know?
Yeah, that to me is I think one of the areas that's so, and it's probably better now, but it used to be like the big thing was like people would load sport specific movements with weight, like throw a
Uh-huh.
heavy baseball or something,
I,
and
I
not
don't
like
I don't know that
not
it's
like
better.
a
Not it hasn't got better in Washington
yeah,
that much right
yeah,
now.
not like a slightly heavier baseball that's like maybe a few grams heavier. Like you're throwing like
Yeah,
a
you're throwing.
like
Go
a
grab the shot puts. We're throwing them down.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
What's that? It's a ball bearing. Um, but like, yeah, it's like the people don't have a good sense of like understanding the dynamics of the task in front of them.
Right.
And so their concept is like the most obvious thing is what's visually similar
Yeah.
or what is the quality like the people that are good weightlifters are good because they're explosive.
Right.
Weightlifting may augment that, but they're just freakishly explosive and powerful people. Like They're super. They have a very nice blend of like incredible strength, great leverages,
And speed.
and speed,
Yeah.
right? Um, so you have this like predisposition to be good at it, and then people will associate, oh, the things they did got them there. It's the other way
Right.
around. They're
Yeah.
there because they can do these things well. And so, yeah, it's like you just fall into that thing where it's like people look at stuff as that's the thing we want. Let's just do what they're doing, you know?
Yeah, yeah. You look at again descriptive versus prescriptive, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you look at strength culture in the United States, like you can find there's research on like what gladiators did for strength training, right? So you can
Yeah.
go back a long ways for strength training, but in the United States, right, it started out as like a freak show, strongman, odd
Yeah.
lifts, like it was just dudes doing weird stuff with iron, right? And then
Yeah.
it kind of split into like weightlifting, strongman, bodybuilding, and the odd lifts, which kind of became powerlifting, right?
Yeah.
And um if you're trying to build a team, like you have a wrestling squad or a football squad, and you went and looked at each one of those groups, and you see, footage of like Vardanian jumping out of a building, you're like, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
I want my athletes to do that,
Yeah.
without understanding that he's at the top of the pile for that
Yeah.
because he was strong and fast, right? Like
Yeah.
it wasn't necessarily that it was the training that pushed him. Not that the training hurt him. Like I'm sure that it helped a bunch, but like when you're looking at those outcomes, you're not thinking about, again, training principles, right? You're not thinking about
Yes.
those
Yeah.
fundamental processes. You're just saying somebody else was successful with this. That's what I want to do with my guys,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And yeah, yeah.
Totally.
Our coach had a picture of Verdanian jumping over something in the weight room. It
Oh,
was,
nice.
prominently framed, black and white
That's
photo.
cool.
Yeah.
You
That's
kind of
nice.
get it the opposite way. Sometimes I do with athletes where they might bring up a Randy Moss or something, and they're like, "Well, he didn't lift," and it's like, okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
yes, sure, like I'm sure he did more than says,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
but like my argument there is like, man, think of what he missed out on.
Yeah.
Or like
Yeah.
I think it was Herschel Walker. It was one of those old
Hmm.
great running backs, and he was like, I only ever did push-ups and air squats.
Right.
And it was like, damn,
Yeah.
just think how great you would be if you squatted 700 pounds.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
holy crap,
Yeah.
you were already an absolute freak.
Hmm.
So, but
Yeah.
that's a terrible idea to just be like,
Well,
what? I'm only ever doing push-ups and then
and
air
the other
squats.
side of that coin is, are you Randy Moss? Like, are
Yeah.
you
That's,
six
yeah.
foot five and you run a
Right.
4.2?
No,
Like,
yeah, like, but
Yeah.
that's
That,
and it might even be crazier now because you get the like on your cell phone and they're super
yeah.
interesting people that highlight. So like I love watching like a Juju Mufu
hmm
highlight.
Yeah.
If you just try to get in workout just by watching his,
uh-huh.
you know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
could be doing like 14 band upside down. Like I just watched today where he was doing like the dumbbell John Claude Van Damme splits with the 180-pound dumbbell. It's like that's really
Yeah.
great. That's just a him being strong.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
should not. That's not a
Yeah.
thing that you should be trying to do. That helps nothing besides be awesome
Yeah.
at what he does.
Yeah. And you're seeing the highlight reel too, where it's like, how long does it take to get these performances, right? Like
Right.
how many years are these people training to get to be this strong or this powerful or whatever it is?
hmm
Yep.
Well, it really dilutes, like we were talking about, like I've never been in another weight room where I've seen somebody deadlift 700 pounds. Like
Yeah.
at competitions on Instagram, they joke everybody deadlifts 700 pounds, but like in a weight room, I've never seen
Yeah.
another person do it, you know?
Yeah.
And so it's like I know that it seems like there's lots of people, or like you were talking about earlier, where people see a lot of success and they're like,
Yeah.
all these people are doing all these things. And it's like, man, it took them 15 years to get there.
Yeah.
Like that wasn't
Yeah.
an overnight thing,
And you hope they're being honest
Yeah.
and just
Yeah.
so they don't. Oh, I did this one method and it got me there, and
Uh,
they've never done it, or
Yeah. Or
Yeah.
omit the,
or just like steroids.
yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you know, for my kids, obviously that's different. That's health related. But if you're in a untested federation or you're strongman or bodybuilding, like that's nature of the beast. But don't go then to your local gym and be like, I'm I'm all natty, baby. Like that's
Yeah. Then you get the what's his name, the Brad Castleberry types that are like,
Fake weights?
or Mike O'Hearn is probably the
Oh
best,
my
Michael.
God.
right?
Oh my
They're
god.
like at this point he just can't. He's like he can't ever come out because it's just
Yeah, he's
like
pinned in.
yeah. And
I
it's actually
sometimes
probably
think about that. Like, what if he
Yeah.
really was just the most genetic, and he really was
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
the least
It was-
believed human on the planet. Like he's like, guys, I really am natural.
Maybe it is. Maybe that's the reality is like it's just like, yeah, he just happens to be like the only guy who's like this genetic freak, right? And it's just like,
Listen, if that's true,
um,
please get on steroids.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
Can
yeah.
we
I
see
want
what
to.
yeah.
I
he
want to
looks like
see.
after?
Well, that's the sort of another tangent, but that's like to me the only way to ever prove it is like you have to okay. It's like we ask this question a lot. Like if somebody is the number one indicator somebody is cheating is that they're winning,
Yeah,
right?
it's the
Like that's
John
the
Hack
most
story, right?
right. Yeah. And or like I remember Dan Green had a story like that where he went to a meet and everyone's like, "Oh, what do you take?" He's like, "I don't take anything." And they're like, "You're full of shit." And then he came back the next year with like 400 pounds on his total. And he's like, "No, no, now I'm taking drugs." It's like,
Yeah,
okay. So
yeah,
like he'd have to do the drugs, he'd have to do the thing for us to see what he really is capable of,
yeah,
right?
and
Right.
yeah, yeah,
Um, yeah. And it's like if you were like, okay, Mike, you're gonna take like all this trend, all this shit, and all this, and he does it, and he actually gets a little bit worse and loses, he loses some body weight, he gets a little worse. Like, well, this is less dose than I was on before.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That'd be like the worst case scenario for him. Yeah,
yeah. The one thing that I will say about him is that the number of people that I've ever met that trained as long or as consistently is
yeah,
almost zero.
yeah,
Like that is really, really, really impressive to me. Like the duration of his span
yeah,
of training.
yeah. I mean, he's definitely like, I mean, he's accomplished. It's not like he's done nothing. It's not like he's like uh, a a sort of like flash in the pan.
Uh-huh.
I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
I don't know how good of a bodybuilder he was, but he's like clearly in amazing shape and held on to that for an extremely long time
Yeah.
and clean. So it's like double impressive.
Double impressive.
But,
He's doing it.
yeah. As a powerlifting coach, I'm the exact. I assume everybody is on
Yeah,
steroids. If they beat one of my lifters, I'm like, let's test that guy.
Yeah.
See where they're at here.
Like it's such a funny thing because like we have pretty good testing now.
yeah,
And if you're in a sport like track and field, there's random out of meet testing, and you're heavily penalized for missing random
yeah,
tests. And they archive your samples for 8 years, so they can come back, and if they test you for something
yeah,
and they didn't have a test then and they do now, you still get your medal revoked, right?
Right.
yeah,
And not every sport is like that. Not every point in history is like that. Like a lot of
yes, yeah.
times you hear, drug tests are just an IQ test, and it's like, okay, well, become a track star and beat that drug test. I want to see it. In the United
I
States specifically, right?
yeah, that's a good point. I think that's a very overblown statement, like or not a very it's a cavalier thing to say. It's an IQ
Hmm.
test because it's actually quite a bit more challenging. Like if that was the case, like, and maybe I'm totally naive, but like I would think you'd have a lot more rampant drug use in
Yeah.
every sport. It is challenging, right? I mean, unannounced testing is difficult to get around, and like you have to be a very like on top of a disciplined person in sports like weightlifting or powerlifting where there's zero money,
Right.
and like the risk is actually going to be high because then you're kicked out and it's like a big
You,
thing.
you're all
Like,
you're worth is your reputation.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like I'd be surprised if it's like super prevalent. I'm sure it is some places, but yeah.
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 Yeah. Yeah. Because it really is just a night and day difference. Like if you're,
Yeah.
there's professional sports where they're like, we're going to test you twice a year, and we're going to let you know 3 months ahead of time or whatever.
Yeah.
Like they
Yeah.
give
Right.
you there's guidelines for when they're going to test you.
Yeah.
I still
Exactly.
think that's awesome because it prevents people from being,
Yeah.
on the gas full time,
Yeah.
24/7, doing whatever, right? Like it really limits how much damage they can do themselves, which I think is a really good place to be in a sport.
Yeah.
But I don't know how you would beat like if you were trying to do USA track and field.
Yeah.
I
It'd be
don't know
so
how
hard.
you ensure your legacy and try to
Yeah.
cheat when they archive it for 8 years.
Yeah.
Well,
And I'm
even
sure
go ahead.
I'm sure it happens, but it's like again, yeah, it's probably much harder than it seems.
Hmm.
And I can't remember exactly who it was, but it was one of the top CrossFit guys, and he was talking about how like they just follow him around. I can't remember if when he was trying to get into the Olympics or if it was the CrossFit, and they were like they show up at your house and they don't leave again.
Yeah.
He's like
Yeah.
guys came to school with me and sat in the freaking class, waited the
Yeah.
whole class until you pee. So like
Yeah.
that random that's pretty hard. That's pretty hard
Yeah.
to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and again, like the reality is it probably all comes down to just corruption, where it's like
Yeah.
drug tests are easy to beat if you just don't take the drug test, right?
Right.
So it's like
Yeah.
if
I mean,
somebody's
that's what
getting
we learned
paid,
from Sochi, right? Was that
yeah,
the drug tests were so hard to beat that they cut holes in walls and switched out samples, and
yeah,
like
exactly,
they
right?
weren't actually beating the test. They
No,
were.
they just were, yeah, just
Yeah.
swapping it out, right? The old
Hmm.
glory
Yeah,
hole urine swap.
just change the way you're cheating.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Like, so
Yeah. Yeah.
I got to have a conversation with an Olympic coach, and just the things that they're doing that aren't cheating, but ways to take advantage of everything.
Hmm.
And I
yeah,
wasn't aware, like, obviously he didn't say names, but he was like, there's a lot of money. Like, he got to bring his athletes to a lot of very awesome opportunities. Just,
yeah,
the investors that are behind making sure that the American athletes win.
Right.
I was like, oh, I guess if I had $1 trillion, I might throw a bunch of money at the,
Yeah. Yeah.
just to make sure our
yeah,
athletes are the best. But
yeah.
one thing that I do want to give you an opportunity to do, because I'm pretty interested, is if you want to talk about your uh,
Weightlifting AI.
weightlifting AI.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we have two products actually. So one is the AI, which is like it's an app that builds weightlifting programs around like different weaknesses, and you say, hey, I've got these. Here's my numbers. It'll calculate what are the best training loads for bringing your snatch and jerk into alignment, these kind of things. Um, and we're actually pushing out a huge revamp of the entire platform with a whole bunch of new stuff. So that's coming out in probably the next couple of months. It's been a long time developing, but yeah, we use like AI basically to look at like what is the best exercise selection based on the errors you have, and it's all like non-deterministic. So we use AI to sort of come up with like a pool of what are the best solutions to this, or what are the most likely best solutions, and then we can continue to fine tune this so that people get like one really good programs. But like I was saying before, the program is only part of it. Like the other side of this is that we use a lot of data to basically inform what's the next training supposed to look like.
Right.
What is next? What should next Tuesday be? Um, and that took a lot of work around kind of creating a model for what training load is and what fatigue is, and how we would like model this idea of you do a certain amount of training. We need to be able to compare the stress of doing bicep curls to the stress of doing squats, and have like a universal sort of arbitrary concept that applies based on movement, whatever the movement is, like how much eccentric load there is, or how long the range of motion is, or the actual mass of the object you're moving, and then take all this information and build some kind of model that allows the system to say, hey, squatting this much for this many reps is going to be about this much stress. That's a certain amount of fatigue. How do we decay this fatigue over days, over time frames, to give you the next program, the next workout? So that's kind of where we're at now as far as like the actual like product, what we're going to launch soon. And it builds great programs, and it does a good job of managing programs, which is really cool. So it's kind of like the idea of having like a lot of what a coach is in in your phone. And then we have some other cool stuff we're working on with like computer vision to be able to like identify an exercise. So we've trained models to like look at a snatch and break the snatch up into its different phases. So you could put a video of a snatch in, and it would be like, here's your second pull. We can use some other models that do like pose estimation. So it would look at like the joint angles of your body in that phase. And we can say, hey, you're throwing your shoulders back too early, or your knees are too straight here. And then, we'll be able to deliver that feedback to people.
That's cool.
And then the other product we have is like a coaching product, which is like a coaching platform. So if you ever used like True Coach or anything like that, like I was frustrated by the fact that there's so little as far as like outside of spreadsheets, the ability to like really track a lot of numbers and data and like do coaching on these platforms that are really designed for like personal trainers. We wanted a product that's designed for people who do like barbell training, right? So we have a coaching product called Coach Logic, which has all of the same elements of the AI stuff from the app, the original app, where you'll be able to like design, hey, give me a weightlifting program or a powerlifting program, and it'll be able to generate those programs for you based on a set of different things you want to do, and work on this issue. Like I jump forward in the snatch. Okay, here's your probabilistically like best exercises for that. Here's the best loading for that. And then again, it'll track this idea of like stress and fatigue and then adjust the training for you if you want. But ultimately, it's just a better coaching platform as well. It's like the basic features are super straightforward, a lot of data tracking, long-term planning, video analysis. So you can draw on the screen, actually coach people like, in a good way, all inside of one platform. So
Yeah.
yeah.
That's really cool.
That part, I was talking to Kyle beforehand. I was hoping that was a part of it, just because, like for me, like I know the cues for powerlifting. I've been in that world long enough that when I see a problem happening, I probably could at least get close to knowing what
Round your back, jerk as much as possible. Yeah.
Yeah.
We know those
But
kids.
like I work at a relatively small school, so there's not like a full-time sprint coach, and there's not Olympic training. So I get myself into training where, I might be up the night before learning, and it's like, all right, okay, I can go through this, whatever we're doing that day. But I'm sure there's a sprint coach can come out and watch and in 10 minutes be like, your knees are droopy, you're not striking with the pad of your foot. And I'm sitting there going like, hey, you guys are doing good, just not wasting our time, but not being as efficient. And I was like, man, it would be really nice to be able to just put a camera on a kid, because like the Olympic lifts, I've really not been in that realm much. Like I said, I think I could teach a kid how to do it, but not
so much finesse in them, right? Like we were talking about, I had a group of kids that would come in early in the morning and lift weights, a group of girls, and one day we were just having fun, and I was like, let's do a max overhead press, right?
Yeah.
And of course that turned into a max push press. And then one of the girls did the most beautiful like squat jerk that I've ever seen in my life. Like, and she'd never done it before, but it was too much weight, and so she just dropped, right?
Nice.
And I remember she did that, and I was like, okay, first of all, you need to put that weight away. Second of all, you need to go find a weightlifting coach. Like, I don't even know if you like. She wasn't even particularly strong or fast or anything, but I was like, the number of people who can move like that, unprompted, without any mobility work, just like, all the extension of the shoulder and that internal rotation for the catch, and everything was just so beautiful. And like how it takes a long time to develop the eye to see all that stuff.
Yeah. And the whole thing for us was like this. For me, this whole thing is about like, it comes back to those two kind of basic ideas, which is like none of this is going to happen by accident. Like you're not going to get better at stuff by accident. Like it doesn't just, oh, I just happened to do the right program. So you have to have a systematic approach to like taking data in, doing something with it, understanding the data, and then making actionable choices off of that. So the whole product, the whole idea is to like, we want to build a bunch of stuff that really does a great job of giving coaches, not just like, hey, here's a graph of what their bench press did over the last 3 weeks, but like, here's a graph of what their bench press did according to what we understand about training principles. Like this might be what's happening. So you can maybe you need to add volume or this or that and get suggestions. That stuff will build into it. And then the other thing is all of this is extensible. So like, as AI models improve, as more and more crazy shit comes out, we want to be able to leverage that. So it's like the training space isn't stuck in a world where it's just like, programs and PDFs and templates. It's like, I'd love to see people use the product in a way that like you can track a high school kid's progression of their strength, and development, and like, hey, we're doing 30% of our volume is dedicated to, lower limb stuff, or this guy got hurt and we added, 6 weeks of rotator cuff work or whatever it is. You could take all this stuff as data and show it to recruiters, show it to scouts, and be like, look, here's their training history. You can see videos, training logs, all this stuff to show what this kid has been doing and where they're at. And that's the kind of thing that is super valuable to people, in the sense that you can say, we've got records, we can take this data, as models get better, as everything gets better, as we understand more, we can continue to reanalyze the data and learn more about it. And then that can help everybody else on the platform as well. Once we learn people in different demographics, how they respond, you can say, okay, people that are whatever, heavier and slower or whatever, are going to benefit from X, Y, and Z. So
Hmm.
that's kind of the goal, is to like have a big sort of repository for sports science at some point. Um, I have like Josh Gibson and um, I forget his Chris Tabor. Both of those guys are kind of embedded with us, so they're doing a bunch of stuff and feeding us a bunch of cool information and stuff. So it's exciting. I'm most excited to move into this phase of the coaching thing where you're building something for other coaches to do
Right.
stuff with
Yeah.
versus just picking up another client who's gonna,
That's a
quit
big
on
part of the
you.
reason why we're trying to move things forward here too. Like you work with, we've been working with kids for a while, several years, and it's like we were talking about our favorite training stories, and it was like, oh, those were the first 2 years that we coached. Like,
Yeah,
like I like
that's cool.
the joy that we're getting out of it. Like I still like working with kids. It's still a lot of fun, but like now you look around and you see systems, and like there's kind of like we're really excited about doing the podcast because it gives us the opportunity to have these kinds of conversations with people who know what's going on, and that kind of like elevates the thinking around it, so people aren't doing as much crazy or ineffective or
Yeah,
whatever kind of things, right?
yeah,
And so
totally.
same motivation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is the first place my brain went after I was like, oh, that would actually be really good. Do you think that the AI could coach an Olympic champion
Oh yeah, 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 yeah,
just on its own? Like maybe not yet,
It,
but
I
did
mean,
you
I
just
think
put us all out of jobs?
yeah.
so we talk about this a lot. It's like the idea, like, is something like artificial intelligence capable of doing this stuff, and like could it coach somebody to a high level? On the app, the highest level we saw somebody get to was, I think there was a girl who medaled at nationals in weightlifting doing the app. There was a kid that qualified for the Asian Championships, which is a big meet. Um, there's people that have used it at those levels. I think, like, would you ever get anything that can do that? It's like, I think there's going to be a level where two scenarios would have to happen. One, it has to be at a level, the AI has to be at a level that is so far from where it is now, but it would have to be with a person who grew up interacting with like AI agents since childhood.
Yeah.
Because a person now is never going to trust something that doesn't they have no relationship with. Like the way we interact with social media is very different than the way kids who grew up with it
Right.
day one interact with it. So if it does happen, it would happen at a point where it's so capable, but people are so comfortable with it being like a surrogate for a person that they don't think twice about like a phone telling them to do a certain exercise, right? That point is pretty far down the road. So I don't know. Maybe, I mean, do we all just get nuked before that because AI is like, oh, you guys are trying to kill me. Like, time to finish
More
this.
trouble than you're worth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Yeah, it's tough to say, but
You
I
know
mean,
how my
theoretically,
client could be the
maybe.
best squatter? I kill everybody else.
Yeah, yeah, there we go.
Now
World
you're the only
champion.
squatter. You are now the
That's
world's strongest
yeah,
squatter, but
that's
there's no other
exactly
people.
what
Yeah,
would yeah, what it
The
would do,
full
right? It's
circle
like,
podcast right
yeah,
there.
yeah,
that's a really good point. That's funny.
yeah.
But
Yeah. Full circle.
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
now my new
for
goal on
sure.
every podcast is I got to get it all the way back around.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, it
Yeah,
really goes back to what you said right in the beginning was the best quality of a coach is the guy that's going to make the relationship.
yeah,
And that's the one
yeah.
thing that at least now AI won't be able to do.
No,
'Cause
Yeah.
when it
no,
gets
no.
hard, it could spit more numbers at you, but how are you going
Yeah,
to deal with the fact that her boyfriend dumped her and she needs someone to talk to and bitch at
Yeah.
and
yeah,
that's what's going to get her through training today where
yeah.
just the program that's all the success I've had the success I have had I think is because I'm really good at relationships and just getting kids there. It's not
Hmm.
because, there I have some coaches that, my buddy from another school is like, I want to come watch your class. I was like, yeah, I bet you your class is better. Like, my class
Yeah,
has kind of gotten crazy. I've talked to Kyle about that. Like the programming has gotten weird just to fit the specific,
The constraints of
the
having
of
kids
the
for 50 minutes
and
and, all
and
that kind
yeah,
of stuff.
having my stud middle linebacker in the same class with someone that's never lifted before. Like, how do you make that work? But it's just being a human and listening to the kids and pushing them when they need to be pushed and
Yeah. Yeah.
letting them be when, and some people just can't. I've had coaches that couldn't. I've seen coaches that couldn't, and
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
and it works. It works for some people.
Yeah.
It does, but it never worked for me.
You
Yeah.
know,
Relationships
for
were
me,
lost.
it's all like this initial stage is all about like, can we create really useful tools for coaches,
Yeah.
right? Like one is like data tracking, like consolidation of the different things people do is the first step. Like, let's not need four different apps to do the job we're trying to do. Let's
Right.
just
Right.
put what you need in front of you. The second step is like, what can we build on top of those that is actually useful? Like computer vision's cool, but if it sucks, it's worthless.
Uh-huh.
It's like bar velocity. Can we get super accurate bar velocity and have it be something that just automatically gets calculated every video? So you're not setting up equipment, everything that can happen in a package that every person has. So you don't have to buy special equipment. Like, can we build useful tools? And then the final stage is, can we take information and data we collect from this platform and do useful things for coaches? It's always got to come back to, if a coach isn't going to use it every single time they touch the app, or when they, like, most of the time, like, it's not really going to be useful to them. If they have to do something that breaks up their workflow, they become less efficient. So if our product allows coaches to be doing better programming, doing better coaching, having access to what they need, and they can make their job more efficient, they can spend more time building the relationship
Yep.
and actually like
Exactly.
being a coach who's there behind somebody, pushing them to do the thing that that person doesn't believe they can do.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Focus on those relationships, the sports
Yeah.
psychology part of it. Do you guys intend on ever, like publishing any of the data or making your data that you gather open source at any point or anything like that?
So there's an interest. We were just having this like little conversation before about like the nature of AI and tech.
Uh-huh.
It's super open source, right? Like, so AI is very open source. We're actually kind of discussing how like Apple has like a sort of monopoly with like the App Store, and like they're very closed off. So I think just the nature of what we're doing, it's like we were talking, we could take every single element of our product and like the AI platform and say, here's how we build training programs, here's how the AI builds programs, not give anybody the actual weights of the variables, which is like the sort
The
of secret
magic.
sauce. But you could give everybody the exact process for it, and we would have no, like, it doesn't matter. People can go
Yeah.
and build this thing, whatever. It's all in like the specific knowledge we have. So I think we probably will. Like, the goal would be to like share as much of this as possible. I think if we put out our formulas and what we're doing and show people, even if they use them, they might make things better, right? They might give us back a better formula, like, hey, if you guys did this, or this is a better way to calculate this, we could improve. So I don't see any reason why we would really hold anything that's not, directly core to the business itself, and make this open source and accessible to people.
Yeah, because the heuristic parts of like how do you judge what is a good decision, a bad decision, like I'm not so interested in as a coach, but I would be
Right.
super interested in the recorded training data for like
Yeah.
how people progressed, if they
Yeah.
were stuck at something for a long time and they moved through, what were the
Yeah.
interventions that happened
For
ahead of time
sure.
and stuff.
Yeah.
Like I mean, but mostly I'm not interested in writing an AI app. That sounds like
Yeah.
an exceptional amount of work, and I don't envy
Yeah.
the task that you've
Yes.
done, but
Lots of work and lots of money.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But that training data I think would be super
Yeah.
valuable,
Yeah, I didn't even think
Yeah.
about that. Like, to when the AI breaks a plateau,
Right.
and then you get to
Yeah.
go like that's some coaches, if you're going like one on one, or maybe if the client was high enough, you would spend the time. But like normally, I just throw general things,
Yeah,
Hmm.
general principles, right? Yeah.
knowing that all right, it's a plateau, but you're probably zooming way in. Like,
Yeah.
is this a 6 month plateau, or did
Hmm.
you not eat this morning, so your bench max was the same as the last bench
Yeah,
max?
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
know, that's a
And
plateau.
and totally. And a huge part of it is like, if we give a lot of that info to coaches, like, that's the point of this, is like getting everybody to be better, right? So
Hmm.
it's like giving that information and showing what we can show, I think is the thing that will make everybody better and will ultimately push us to do the job, right? Because also, like, we could give all this information, people say, hey, we're missing these pieces, like, you need to track this data. and we'll improve, right? It's that same thing of we're always wrong, it's just being less wrong. So the more we
Yep.
can share this stuff, the better it'll be for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have anything
Yeah.
else that you're working on that we can share for you? Plug?
That's it. It's just those, the new AI app is coming out for weightlifting, and then the Coach Logic platform is up and running right now, and we're just continuing to build out features for it.
Yeah. And then we got a hold of you on Instagram. Like, do you have a preference for where people contact you?
Yeah, you can reach me on Instagram. I don't think I actually post for the last like 6 months, but yeah, Instagram is great. I still check the DMs, and
Yeah, I don't ever post on mine really anymore. I found myself getting trapped into like, hey, I did 315 for 18 today. Can we do 335 for 18 tomorrow? Even though I'm supposed to take a deload, my dumb ass is in the
yeah,
weight room doing dumb stuff again,
yeah,
So I realized it
yeah.
wasn't very healthy. Yeah,
I
but I'm
think
there all the
someone
time.
someone got a hold of my app, and just the feed is just all like a lot of like women in bikinis. So they must have been scrolling
They
through that.
must
I
have
don't
been.
know. I
They
don't know
must have
what
been.
happened. Someone
I
else
don't know if
got
that
it,
guy has a dad.
probably.
No
Yeah.
dad.
Oh,
No dad. If he
it's
had a dad.
it's just all like, searching for like wholesome families. Like, oh, that's like a whole like nuclear family, their dad and a mom and kids. Like, it's the whole feed. It's just
Just looking
that.
up
But
1950s
there,
U.S. government propaganda. The
there's
nuclear family is the best family. Women don't need financial independence. Don't
there's
worry about it.
one search that says, "Will you be my?"
Totally.
Will you
It's
be
just
my?
pictures of
Yeah.
dads.
Yeah. This is my Google search history is like, how long does it take to get cigarettes from the gas station?
Yeah.
Like, when's he coming back? He's been gone a few years now.
Where
Uh,
you're looking up gas station, and then you're like,
Yeah.
well, walking. If they walk to Maine,
he could
like, does it?
he could still be in North
He sh
Dakota.
Yeah, he should be back any day now. It takes 16 years to walk to the middle of
Yeah, yeah,
Nebraska from
yeah.
here.
There was news about the Mississippi River flooding. That probably held him up a little on the transit
His
back.
oxen died crossing the
His
Mississippi.
oxen. Cool. All right. Well,
Yeah,
thank you very much for being on. I got two more questions for you.
yeah,
Uh, one is, there's a few things on our list that I'd still love to talk to you about, but we've already been going for 2 hours, and I think that this chair is killing me. I'm going to buy a new
yeah.
chair. I've learned that new discovery, right?
Nice.
So, would you be interested in coming back on again sometime? Talk a little bit more about
Absolutely.
training psychology and probably get a little more in the weeds
It
on
would have been so
training
much better
recovery.
if you were just like, absolutely not.
Yeah, yeah, that'd have been
This
hilarious. That
was
would have been a great.
torturous. You guys will not have any success.
Yeah.
I'll do it if you're not on.
Yeah,
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 yeah, yeah. If I can talk to an empty room, the sign is pretty. I'll talk to the sign. I don't
Yeah,
want you
yeah,
guys in the room. And then,
yeah. Absolutely. I'd love to.
yeah, great. I'm really happy to hear that. And then two is, would you mind staying on for just a couple minutes to talk to us about podcast
Yeah,
business?
for
I know
sure.
you've been doing it and stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, I mean, I'll just cut it there, but
yeah.
keep the thing
I
going.
don't have a sign off. Maybe
Yeah,
we
yeah.
should get a sign off.
We should get a sign off. Should we
Yeah.
put it in right now?
There you go.
Go work harder,
And
be coachable.
There you go.
Do you have a sign off? Could you have a catchphrase for when you do
I
this?
don't, we used to do I was the worst at closing out videos. It would take 5 takes every time. I was so bad. Yeah.
we had
Okay,
we
we'll
just
work on
ramble, and
something.
then it's like, oh, just leave all that in. That was all good.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Just kind of quietly mumble your way off and be
yeah.
done.
Uh-huh. Yeah, so